Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. I'm your host, Nicholas Allen, and my guest today is Jason McCoy. Started out his career in the military in the Air Force Security Forces. Then he became an OSI agent, Office of Special Investigations. After that, he went on to be an FBI agent and is now working as the co-founder and spending all of his free time with Endex Archery, developing archery therapies and providing our heroes with the equipment necessary to begin their archery journey. Acta non verba. I'll have links to their socials in the show description. Today's episode is brought to you by the Green Beret-owned business Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley, who is said Green Beret. Precision Wellness Group helps you restore balance, unlock vitality through bioidentical hormone therapy and evidence-based personalized telemedicine. Dr. Taylor Bosley is a board-certified physician, a U.S. Army veteran, and a Green Beret, and an actual doctor who can prescribe you actual medicine. So if hormone therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, peptides is something you've been thinking about for a while now, or just looking into, look no further than Precision Wellness Group. I'll have links to their website and socials in the show description, along with Jason McCoy and Endex Archery. I do appreciate you guys. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, pass these episodes along. Thank you for listening. Leave us a review and enjoy the show. Jason McCoy, welcome to Lesser Known Operators, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay. No, as I say, absolutely. I love seeing guys that are doing or make me want to do more. You're always doing something with veterans or helping guys or being positive, doing your stuff with Endex Archery. And that's some of the content I actually like consuming on Instagram. It's like I see people do stuff like I need to do more. I don't know what more looks like for me because I'm already losing my mind with all of the shit I'm doing. But as far as like giving back and helping veterans, I love seeing what you're doing over there, and I applaud you for it.
Yeah, man. Well, I consider it an honor to be able to do it. I'm very thankful that archery became a passion of mine and an outlet for me, and then I'm able to share it with people. When this thing kicked off, I never imagined we'd be where we are now, and then the plans we have for the future. It's just, it's like, who am I, and what is this thing that we've built? I'm constantly flattered and humbled by the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, I told you about my notes I got over here, right in the center, in the circle. Be humble, a constant reminder of, and keep your head down. I've been saying that a lot lately. Everybody's like, "How you doing?" I was like, "I'm just trying to keep my head down and
Yeah.
work through it and take everything as it comes." But one thing that popped into my head as I was walking down here is, how much does Joe Rogan help you every time he brings up archery and starts talking about how awesome it is? Because that's a wide range, and he gets to a lot of people. So a lot of people have got to go, oh, maybe Index Archery. You might get some passive association there with what you're doing with stuff he says, because he reaches millions and millions of people.
Millions of people, man, and it's really brought archery into the mainstream. I think not only has he done a lot for what we're trying to do, but he's just done a lot for the archery community, bringing some of that into the spotlight. And yeah, I think it's huge. And I was literally on Instagram just before we jumped on here, chatting with another veteran that was like, "Hey, heard about you guys, and have been considering archery for a while." And then you know, uh, something on Instagram popped up, and he's like, "Let me give this a try." So it has people um, considering alternatives, which is what we're all about, right? Index. Most people in the military or law enforcement know that Index is an acronym for end of exercise. And what we're trying to do, the exercise that we're ending, is the exercise and futility that a lot of people, um, gravitate towards when it comes to mental health and post traumatic stress. And that's alcohol, drugs, isolation, risky behavior, loose morals, all those negative things that people are using to cope. We call bullshit. We call end of exercise, and our goal is to put them, on a path to healthy healing and, some alternative positive therapies that they can use. Um, but there's also this community, like I talked about, this archery community that's filled with so many amazing people. So that's the added benefit, right? I hand you a bow, I hand you a shiny object, and if all you ever do is shoot a bow, you're getting some benefit from it. But when you really dive in and you start interacting with the community and going to some of these events we have now across the nation, not Index, but the archery community, you really find a new home. And that matters for a lot of veterans, who've lost that sense of camaraderie and who've lost that built in community the military gives you. When you go out and you meet, a group of guys, gals, whatever, um, and you start having those same types of conversations you had in the military, you're laughing, you're joking, you're giving each other a hard time. Um, it really fills a hole for a lot of people.
I like that you use the word alternatives. How'd you come up with using that to lump everything else into?
Well, so a lot of what I do with Index and a lot of my philosophy around what we're doing comes from me, right? I consider myself patient zero in this. Um, so the background of Index started with a deployment that I was on in 2015. Um, you know, we were doing dismounted patrols through villages, and on 21 December 2015, my team was on a dismounted patrol. Motorcycle V-bed came through and killed 6 of our team members. Um, and that was only 2 months into that deployment. So finished out the deployment, got home, and home at the time was Alaska. I was stationed up at J-Bear. So I got home in April and started kind of going down that rabbit hole that a lot of people go down, right? It's um, now that I have time to myself, I'm not working 24/7. I start thinking about things. I start what ifing. That survivor's guilt kicks in, which leads to depression, which leads to I'm in a bottle every night. Um, I've recently started opening up more about it, and I was at the point where I was exhibiting almost some crackhead behavior, where it's like my wife was a school teacher. My kids were young, but they were all in school, either kindergarten, pre-K, something like that. But they're gone all day. I'm on my R&R, and I'm getting drunk every night, sleep until 2:30, 3 in the afternoon, and waking up and saying, "Oh crap!" The wife and kids are about to be home. So I'd run down to the kitchen and I'd throw some ketchup on a plate and throw it in the sink and just make it look like I'd been up and productive all day instead of you know sleeping, just so my wife didn't think anything was wrong. Um, but yeah, going down that path, kind of spiraling. But there's a lot of there's a lot of, I guess, BS training we have to do in the military, right? Your annual
No,
trainings and your
no.
CBTs and all
What
this
are you talking
stuff. And
about?
yeah, man, just a lot of stuff we roll our eyes at. And one of two of those trainings every year were always like suicide prevention training and like mental health awareness training. And you're like, whatever, man. Um, but thankfully, after at the time I think I'd been in the Air Force for 9 years. Um, so I'd heard that stuff a lot, and that those trainings and those conversations kept started floating up in the back of my mind, and it's like, okay, I know what's going on with me. I just don't know how to fix it. Um, and to make a long story short, one day I picked up a bow and never set one back down. Shooting a bow led to so much positivity for me. It led to me acknowledging and calling myself on my own crap and saying, "Hey, you need to get this looked at." I went and spoke with my commander, who I can't say thankfully, but my commander had an experience in Iraq where he was hit by an IED, was nearly ripped in half. I mean, he had a scar from his sternum all the way down his body and up his back again. So he had dealt with some stuff, and he had, he'd gone through that as well. So he was able to give me some great advice and some counseling, which led to me walking into mental health on base. And at the time, as an Air Force OSI agent, you carry a gun every day. You've got a top secret clearance. You've got all this stuff, and people are saying, hey, if you go to see mental health on base, they're going to take your gun away. They're going to strip you of your clearance. They're going to lock you up in a room, all this stuff. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. Um, so shooting a bow led to me getting the help that I needed. Um, so when I say, it's an alternative for me, the proof was in the pudding, right? It helped me put down a bottle and stop stop hating myself and start seeking help and put me on a path to wellness.
But a toxic rumor, and every rumor has to start from someplace. So it probably was true at one point that
Yeah,
if you speak up, you're going to get hammered. And but I think that went away many years ago to the point where um, I'm re-recording another episode with Nick O'Kelly here coming up next week. He spoke up so much, and they ignored him. They're like, you're fine. He's like, I'm suicidal. No, you're fine. You're good. They just ignored him. So you have that end of the spectrum. But what a toxic thing for guys' mental health is. They're going to take my clearance away. They're gonna take me off a team. That's the scary part, right? Is the thing you're holding on to the most, being on a team, being with the boys or active or being able to do your job. They're going to take that away from me. Well, I'm just going to keep this to myself and be miserable. And the PX is open. I can just, if I have about a half a bottle of alcohol every day, I can probably keep this under control for in perpetuity, which isn't the case as we've established.
yeah, yeah. Let me just numb myself, and you're right, because for a lot of guys, that may be the only thing keeping them together is their team. That brotherhood, their network. So the thought of losing that support, you know, or for a lot of guys, you work really hard to get on that team, and you want to measure up, and it's you constantly have to prove yourself. And now, some guys look at it as they're admitting they're the weak link, and they just can't handle that. So, the script really does need to be changed, and it starts within the military and within law enforcement, because to me, speaking up about mental health and handling your shit is very admirable. It's an honorable thing to do. And I would never look down on a teammate for saying, "Hey guys, yeah, I'm going to therapy," or "Hey guys, I need help." Or even if they say, "Hey guys, I'm going to take a knee for a little while. I'm going to go down to this treatment center in Florida, and I'm going to get my shit squared away and I'm coming back." Good on you, man. Like, what do you need from us? But, I don't know if that's always said. And I think it needs to be.
That one I know, from talking to guys is a little more common because I think it comes from guys that have been able to coast by not taking care of it or talking to somebody or taking care of a serious issue. They've just bottled it up and pushed it down and gotten rid of it to a certain extent. And then they will see somebody put their hand up or say that I have an issue and they'll trash them because they got through it without doing any of that stuff. A guy says he needs to take a knee and they'll look down on him. So I think that part
Yeah.
is more common because of the things that they went through. Because what's
Yeah. I
the
call those trauma trophies.
well, it's passed downhill, right? But we, to a simpler level, we even with the joke, the last hard class. Everybody, they were in the last hard class
Right.
when they got their skills badge or graduated, got a tab, got their beret or whatever. That's why I joke I was in the first easy class, just to go the opposite of things, and because I don't think I had it as hard as other people. There's other people that had a way shittier time than me, but people in their mind with that, it's like, I got through this. Why can't you get through it? And they compare the past to something in the now. Well, now's not then, and then's not now. When will then be now? Well, soon. Spaceballs. But yeah, if you get compared and you move this standard harder and harder down the road, and
Hmm.
it's untenable. Well, that's another thing that we do to ourselves, kind of sometimes. So there's a lot of shit that goes into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably some truth to that, right? Because training evolves. Um, they find out that, hey, if we break 90% of the people that come through this training, then one, people aren't going to show up, and two, we've got less people to work with. And the old adage, you can't mass produce soft, or you can't mass produce specialized skills, but damn it, they tried during GWAT just because we needed people. So I'm sure they found ways to enhance training to improve success rates. And in some cases, I think the Air Force was under fire a lot because they legitimately did change standards, and they lowered standards to get more people in. So sure, but at the end of the day, um, you I think people should be more introspective because you know what you put in on a daily basis, whether it's in training or after the fact. Once you're on a team or you're doing your job, and you know, and this goes for the finance guys, the mechanics, everyone in the military plays a critical role, and what you put in and how dedicated you are. Um, but going back to the trauma trophy aspect of it, right? There is this stigma when it comes to mental health again, and it's like, oh, what are you complaining for? You went through X, but you know, mine was way worse. And that's another thing that needs to end because trauma is always respective to that person's own experiences. I know people. I grew up in South Louisiana, right? And there's some really rough households in South Louisiana, just like anywhere, I guess, really. But I've got friends who just have loads and loads and loads of childhood trauma, and they can see something absolutely horrific, whether in the military or civilian life, and just brush it off. They're like, that's nothing. Um, but you also have people who just, by no fault of their own, were never exposed to trauma. And so something that, to me, after a career in the military and a lot of years spent in law enforcement, looking at a dead body is nothing for me. But if someone's never seen one, that could be traumatic. So it's not for me to say, oh, you've got no reason to complain. Um, because trauma, I like the term people are using now instead of PTSD, it's PTSI, it's post traumatic stress injury. And it goes back to science, right? And our human bodies and the way that our brain processes things. Uh, that's no one's fault. Their brain is their brain. So I think we should allow people a little bit of grace.
Worst thing to happen to you is still the worst thing to ever happen to you. And that's
Yeah,
whether, you know, Taylor Swift getting a parking ticket or somebody getting blown up in Afghanistan. Still uncomparable to the outside viewer, but to the inside viewer, the person, oh, this is the worst thing to ever happen to me. And
right.
they rate it the same. It's doesn't say, I mean, one can have judgment and say one's worse than the other, but those two people see those things as terrible. So, and I think it's empathy and perspective. And what gives people more perspective is maybe listening to other people's stories and actually listening. Like, I'm taking in this information about and hearing what this person has to say. But it could be, just hanging out with people that went through different experiences than you. Maybe shooting a bow. I don't fucking know. Are you seeing that in what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that was very well put. Um, I think mental health is becoming more mainstream, and it's due in part to guys like you and guys like Denny over at Security Halt. And there's a plethora of people from the veteran community and the first responder community that are talking about this stuff now, which, didn't happen in the past. You look at the Vietnam War and wars previous to that, and they were on the whole other end of the spectrum where, hey, it was manly to bottle that stuff up and never talk about it. And I think the community now is doing a really good job of flipping the script and saying, hey, no, it's manly to acknowledge and take care of your stuff, to handle your bullshit. Um, I'm very hopeful, for the future and for this evolution of where we as a community can take the mental health discussion. It's having a lot of positive impacts. Um,
Yeah, alternative, not just alternative activities, like alternates to sitting in a fucking room with a stranger that you don't know.
yeah,
Which that's for some people, going to
right.
the VA and visiting with a doctor that they like and saying, "Oh, doc, you got this going on." Some people can do that. Some people cannot. And
Well, and
like,
I
yeah,
think there's a spectrum there too, because I'll be the first to admit, I said I went into mental health and it started me on a path, but talk therapy was not for me at the time. I was not ready to talk about it, but it at least opened a door, right? Um, my quiet time with a bow was my therapy. And again, that's scientifically proven. Any activity where you can almost achieve a meditative state. So obviously, meditation, yoga, archery, fly fishing, golf can be therapeutic for some people, especially if you're out there, doing it alone. anything that allows you to focus and allows your subconscious to take over in those moments and start working on that trauma and start building neuro pathways to process that trauma. Because that's all PTSI is. It is an injury, but it's a blockage. It's an inability for your brain to process what's going on. So there's a lot of alternatives out there. For me, archery just happens to be the best one because archery really resonated with me as a hobby and a sport and activity. Um, but like I said, there's also that community behind it that is very special. I've got a lot of experience as a firearms instructor. I was a combat arms instructor in the Air Force, and then more recently, when I joined the FBI, I was a FBI firearms instructor. So I could have very easily taken Index and done a firearms type thing. And my co-founder Ray, he was also a firearms instructor. But what I find, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but the firearms community can be a little toxic. Um, and it's just there's a different focus there. You go to SHOT Show, and it's more about let's party, let's get drunk. You know,
It's
um,
in Vegas. Come on, like
yeah, yeah. Um, it's a different community. I think the archery community is much more wholesome, much more grounded, um, and very very supportive. So it makes it a very effective alternative because of those different aspects. For us, I look at it as a triad. Up top, you've got your mental wellness. Bottom left, we've got physical wellness because archery is requiring you now to, get off the couch, get out of your house and go outside, and there's also proven benefits to being outside and in nature. And then that third aspect is that social wellness. So as far as alternatives go, there's a lot out there. And we plan to capture that. I guess we can go into this. Our long term plan for Index is something we're calling the Index Archery Proving Grounds. And because I'm an Air Force guy and we're terrible at acronyms, we call it EPIC. Um, so our goal is to acquire, purchase, get sponsorship, however we need to do that. But we want to get 100 acres and we want to build a wellness center there. It's going to have multiple archery ranges, some of which are going to be open to the public. We're going to throw some cabins on the property, a large indoor facility, and then we want to run these what I'm calling deployments for heroes from all over the country. So that's going to be veterans, law enforcement officers, first responders, that type of thing. So they'll come to us for a 5-day intensive retreat. It'll be archery centric. So, day one, they'll get to pick out a bow, they'll get it all set up. We'll put them through an instructional, they'll start shooting. But about 2 hours into that, they're going to need to take a break. You're using muscles in your back and stuff like that you've probably never used before. So breaks are going to need to be had. So maybe after that first 2 hour session, we roll into, hey, here's an ice bath, here's a sauna, here's some treatment that we're going to go through. Um, we're going to go through a yoga class, meditation. We're going to do some art therapy. We're going to have small groups with counselors and psychologists. We're going to have opportunities for one-on-one groups or one-on-one sessions with a therapist, and that may be somebody's first time ever speaking to a therapist. But the whole goal of this is going to be a 5-day retreat, and when they go home, they've got the bow, they've got an ambassador waiting for them back in their home state to introduce them to their local archery community. Um, but they're going to have at least one or two other tools in their toolbox to take home with them, um, and you know set that path. And I stole this idea when I was in the FBI. Anytime you're involved in a critical incident, so that could be a shooting or a mass casualty event or something like that. They send you to what they call the post critical incident seminar. So it's 4 or 5 day event, and it's just jam packed with exposure to as many different wellness modalities as they can find. So that's what we're going to capture.
I like that. I like that. How'd you come up with 5 days? Oh, is it just kind of you want to do a Monday through Friday thing? I mean, if you said that, I missed it.
Yeah. So for me, the goal would be to have them fly in on a Monday, and then we actually
Okay.
go. So that would be a 0 day, their travel day, and then we start on a Tuesday. It goes all the way to a Saturday where we host their culminating event. Is going to be an open to the public 3D archery shoot. So for the uninitiated, 3D archery, it's a lot like playing golf or disc golf, but with a bow and arrow. So you walk a course. Along the course, typical courses, you'll have 21 targets, so 20 scoreable targets plus a bonus. But as you're walking this course, it's a trail cut through the woods or whatever. You'll come to, you know, a cone, a stake in the ground. You know, you can call it a hole if you want to, but it's going to be a shooting lane. And at the end of that lane is a 3D foam target. So it could be, you know, a foam deer, a foam turkey. There's some really cool ones out there. A company called Reinhardt, they make like velociraptors and all kinds of crap. But it's a scoreable target that looks like a real animal. So grab your bow, you have one arrow, and you shoot at the scoring rings of an animal. And typically you're shooting with groups of 3 to 5 people. So everyone shoots their arrow, you go down, you score it, and then you move to the next hole. Um, so that's one of the competitive sides of 3D archery, but it's also really fun for recreation. Again, it's like playing golf with a bow and arrow. Um, so we're going to host an event there, and that's going to allow the archery community here in Virginia to show up and get introduced to these heroes and love on them a little bit. But it also is that exposure to the heroes that like, hey, look how awesome these people are. You know, because again, you know, you may miss everyone needs that friend, especially veterans. You know, we all need that friend that calls us an asshole from time to time, and you just laugh about things. You know, and it's not uncommon to be on an archery course and you draw your bow back and you're shooting for the 12 ring on this deer target and you miss it and you hit an 8 and somebody's like, hey, do better, or you suck, and you just laugh about it, you know what I mean?
Throw your purse at it next time.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it's just those little one liners that you'll get hit with that just remind you of suddenly, you know, you're taken back to, you know, your first duty station and that first group of the boys, you know what I mean? And just all the shit you used to give each other out of love. Um, and you see smiles, man. You see guys come out of their shells. You know, I worked with one guy, um, hardly left his house, didn't do anything alone. He had a service dog. Um, but he was just really into his self, and he was trying some other methods to try to get out there, and they just weren't working for him. And now this guy, you know, he's very outgoing. He's showing up to the range and inviting veterans and inviting other heroes with him, and he's just like he's a totally different person now. And to see that growth and to see how much joy and excitement he gets out of archery and this community, um, you know, it's just for me, it's the evidence that this thing's working.
I never heard of that 3D archery, but there's a lot of things I haven't heard of. That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, and there's an extreme version of that, right? There's this thing that travels around the country called the Total Archery Challenge, and it's like an archery trade show and a competitive shoot kind of mixed into one. However, there's no prizes given out, there's no trophies, but what they do is they travel to different ski resorts throughout the summer, and so you'll ride a ski lift up a mountain and then you'll shoot your way down, and it could be anywhere between like a 4 to 6 mile hike in this crazy mountainous terrain. And some of these targets, you know, you may have a deer target standing behind a tree with a branch in the way, so you've got like, you know, a 6 inch by 6 inch window to shoot through, and that thing's 60 yards away. And then, you know, you'll come to this overlook. You're standing on the side of a mountain and looking over into this valley, and there's a moose target standing out there at, you know, 120 yards, and you're shooting at that with a bow and arrow. You're just dropping bombs. Um, you know, it's the most fun I've ever had in the outdoors, and I've done a lot of cool stuff. But going to one of those events, but then the other benefit is you might have like 3,000 people there, and every one of them is just solid. You know, there's no fist fights. You know, in the afternoons they'll have a bar, they'll do raffles, you know, they have live music, people are getting drunk. There's no fist fights, there's no drama. It's just people showing up to have a good ass time with a bow and arrow.
and you get to wing some of those shots out there that you wouldn't take in real life with an animal because you see something across the way and you go, you know, in your mind, I could hit that. But now there's no chance
Yeah.
of injuring it and never finding it. You go, today's the day. I'm going to hit that
Yeah.
moose.
You can do those what ifs, but there's also another component, man. Like when I started shooting those courses, my success in the deer woods, because I am a bow hunter, it skyrocketed because it gives you the confidence to know that before where you'd be like, oh, I don't know if I can make that shot. Now you know without a doubt, like, hey, I can make that shot because I've done it, you know, under the right circumstance. And you hear that from a lot of people. If they start shooting these types of competitions, you know, their success rate goes up.
So, yeah. for those that listen to Rogan, right? The way he describes that experience of uh, shooting an elk, right? Very, hmm, very in depth, very spiritual. You're totally locked in. And when he says that, I go, oh yeah, I got that with the gym too, right? You do a set of 25 squats at 65% of your max, you're going to find Jesus as well.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of focus and being locked in and calming yourself down and all those other things. And if you look for it, there's a lot of that in sport. When you're redlining and trying to keep yourself calm and trying to execute a mission, a training, and all these other things, you totally lose track of everything else
Hmm.
that's going on around you, and everything's kind of quiet. There's no problems at home. It's just you and looking down. I don't know. Well, we've said shooting many times, but archery here, you're just doing what's in front of you, and there's nothing else going on. Whether you got your music or or just complete silence. You're totally locked into what you're
You're
doing.
locked in. Yeah.
What is it about the archery that draws you in the most? Because you said shooting, you can make anything toxic. I mean, if you get, as soon as you get alcohol involved and then firearms, that's the worst. Uh, Highly not recommended as well. Don't do that, kids.
Yeah, I agree.
But, you have a lot more leeway with archery as well with firearms because you're not shooting a projectile. There's no chance of a round going 1,000 meters and hitting somebody off in the distance by accident when so many NDs. I mean, UND got 100 meters and the thing's going to go. So you get a little more leeway and things like that. But what is it about the actual experience of the archery that drew you in and focused you on that? Because I'm going to assume, in all of your combat experience and training, you didn't shoot a bow while in the military.
Right. No, there's no Rambos running around for us. Um, However, I did have a lot of fun when I was a firearms instructor. We used to some days we'd be finished with our classes by like noon, especially if it was like some ROTC cadets coming through. We'd finish up at noon and then we'd spend the rest of the day shooting bows, on the firearms range. Um, but and when I get into something, I get all the way into it, right? So when archery became my thing, I really dove in. And something that I found fascinating is the mentality, as in most things in the world, right? The mentality between the Western mindset and the Eastern mindset when it comes to archery, right? And specifically, I'm talking about the way Japanese look at archery, because here in America and in the West, archery is all about hitting a dot, hitting your target. It's about the outcome. Whereas in the Eastern mindset and in Japan, it's all about executing the perfect shot. So that's what I try to capture through our program. And oddly enough, executing the perfect shot typically leads to the best results downrange. But we kind of we miss that as Americans. Um, but when you get into the process of archery and when you are executing or trying to achieve that perfect shot execution, it's very zen, right? And that's why archery kind of snapped me out of it when I was going through all that bullshit coming back from that trip to Afghanistan, because I did go out to the range and pulled out my bow, and that first arrow, my heart and my mind really wasn't in it. I knew I needed to get out of the house. I knew I needed to do something. Um, so I draw back, I shoot kind of half ass, and I miss my target by like a foot. Thankfully, it was these huge black targets we had on base. So the arrow still hit the target, but it didn't hit the dot I'm aiming for. And I was kind of like, what is that? Because I consider myself a pretty damn good shot. So for the next 2 hours, I did lock in, and everything else goes away. When you get in the moment and you're actually shooting a bow correctly, you know, you start with your grip, you make sure your stance is right, you knock that arrow, you clip into your string, you draw back and you come to your anchor point, and everything at that moment is gone. You're focused on your target and you're focused on executing that shot like I'm talking about, um, pulling through the shot, trusting, because you're going to have on a compound bow, which is what we use. You've got a sight, you've got a rear sight in the string called a peep, and then you've got your front sight housing, and it's got like little fiber optic pins in there. You're trusting and just letting that thing float around, just like you're shooting a handgun, right? and your breathing is in control. Your your core is strong now because you're maintaining your stance, and you're captured by that moment. You're pulling through that shot, and then suddenly that arrow goes off. And for me, there's just something very majestic about the flight of an arrow, whether it's coming out of a compound bow, recurve bow, traditional bow, whatever. Um, just watching that thing sail and hit that target, um, it's very freeing. And then you do that again, and you do it again. And so for me, that first session that I had, really that turning point in my life, I probably stayed out there for like 2 hours. I shot my bow until my back was screaming and my shoulder hurt, and I was shaking. I couldn't pull that thing back anymore. I said, okay, I'm done. But the realization, whether it was the next day or later that night, I can't remember. But I had that realization that damn, that 2 hours was the first time in like 8 months. I didn't think I didn't think about my guys. Um, I need more of that. So for me, that's what it is. It's very zen, and it requires that mind body connection, but it allows everything just to drift away, and you're just in the moment. And in that moment, you're at full draw, you're focused on the target, and you're getting ready to execute that shot. In that moment, you're not happy, but you're not sad. It's just peace, right? It's just peace and focus, and kind of nothing else exists.
Would you say earlier, the perfect shot? Because what's the old adage? It's like practice makes perfect. No, no, it's perfect practice makes perfect. Because you can practice incorrectly and do it wrong your whole life and just be really good at that.
That's right.
But how how long did it take you to get to where you're like, I'm a pretty good shot?
I also do jujitsu, right? So I like to equate archery to jujitsu. So my wife actually bought me my first compound bow. We got reassigned from New Mexico to Alabama, and I was going to start deer hunting again. So she buys me my bow. And it's really funny because the one that I tried out in the store, we were looking at bows at Bass Pro Shop, and I could draw it back no problem. She goes and surprises me with this new bow, and I take it out to this field, and I go to draw it for the first time, and I can't even pull it back. It was at 70 pounds. I don't know what the one I pulled in the shop was, but I'm just panicking now. I'm like, oh no, I can't even draw this thing. My wife spent all this money, but quickly found out how to adjust that and started shooting. And man, was I terrible. I was that spazzy white belt of the archery community where I had a mixed bag of arrows, because arrows, just like precision shooting, like with a long gun, um, they make match grade bullets, right? And if you want a 135 grain projectile, well, you're not gonna mix in a 147 grain projectile and expect it to be zeroed. Arrows are the same way, but I didn't know that, so I'm shooting all over the place. About probably 3 years into my archery journey, maybe I'm a blue belt at that point. Like I understand the fundamentals, and I can hit what I'm aiming at to a point. But really, it was when I moved to North Carolina. Um, I started shooting with a group of friends there, all veterans, and started shooting in some of these competitions and really dialing in my craft. I say is where I finally started to realize, like, hey, I'm pretty damn good at this. So that was a full 6 years into my journey. It takes a while to achieve the level of confidence that I look for. And there's a test, people who come into our program, the first thing that we do, we teach them all the fundamentals, we give them their bow, and then we get them set up at 20 yards. And I tell them the only thing you're going to do is shoot at 20 yards until you can achieve a 2 inch group consistently. I mean, every time you go out there to shoot at 20 yards, your arrows are within 2 inches of one another. Um, from there, you back up to 30 yards. And now, the calculus of am I doing good enough would be a 3 inch group. So I add, an inch for every 10 yards out to 60 yards. 60 yards is it's a respectable poke with a bow and arrow. So from there, once you get to 6 inches, now we start closing it down. And for you to say, hey, I'm a good archer, can you now at 60 yards get back to that 2 inch group? Um, it's not easy to do, but to me, that's that black belt level of archery.
During that 6 years, did you have a coach or are you kind of just coaching yourself?
Yeah, a lot of my journey was all trial and error, and I like a challenge, and I like learning things the hard way, and failing forward is what I call it. I did have friends and mentors who would give me tips from time to time, but never a professional coach or never paid for lessons. YouTube, obviously, YouTube University is a huge benefit out there, and there's a lot of archery content on YouTube.
So you said the process at Endex Archery. What is your current like regimen for getting guys in? What does it look like when guys come to you? Because you're a nonprofit, correct?
We are, yeah. Yeah, and
And
right now we're an all volunteer nonprofit, no paid employees. I hope someday in the future we're doing well enough where I can make this my job and hire a couple people. But I want the condition for that to be that we're doing so much good work with this being a side hustle that I'm forced to quit my job and go full time to keep up with the demand. Um, as much as I love archery, I can't. This can't be about me and my desires. Yeah, it'd be cool to do this all day, every day, but it needs to be a requirement. So anyway, our process starts right now with our ambassadors. Right, I have ambassadors in 7 different states, and I have quite a few here in Virginia, and it requires us to be active in our community. A lot of us are, I recently left a job with the FBI, but I'm very integrated into the law enforcement community here, and then obviously I'm still in the reserve, so I've got the veteran connections, and we kind of ask the same. If we have some retirees that are you know military retirees. Get active. Go to your local Legion. Go to your VFW. Go get to know the guys at your local firehouse or your PD and start identifying the heroes. Because in order to come into our program, we're looking for the guys that are actively struggling with PTSD or symptoms of PTSD and are looking for a way and are looking to do the work to get better. And then you've also had to have never shot a bow before. I mean, like a lot of kids shoot in school or scouting or something like that, but we're not we're not a free bow because you're a veteran type of nonprofit. Those exist and they're great. But we're looking for the guys who've never even considered archery as therapy and who don't currently have a bow. Um, so we'll just take here in Virginia. Let's say I meet a guy at a community event. I bring him into our bow shop, which is currently in my garage, and I put him through about a 3-hour course, and that's going to cover safety and the basics of archery. Um, and it goes from shooting or not even shooting a bow. It goes from what I call a shot trainer. It's like a little grip with a string attached, and we give you a release aid, and we start there, and you're just learning how to execute a shot. And then I put you on a little trainer bow that's only like 20 pounds of draw weight, um, and we get your form correct, and I teach you how to actually fire an arrow, and then we build you a bow, and from there is where the real work starts because at the end of that 3-hour session, you know how to shoot a bow, you have your own bow and your target and everything you need to get started, and you're sighted in roughly at 20 yards. From there, you got to do your homework. You got to go home or find a safe place to shoot. And I require them to shoot at least 3 days a week and at least 10 rounds of 3 arrows each. So they start building up that muscle memory. They start learning some things about themselves, but more importantly, they're spending that time outside of their own head. So after about a month or so, I'll check back in with them, help them finish sighting in their bow, and then I spend the next 6 months to a year, however long it takes, to get them integrated into the archery community because that's what it's all about. I can't give a guy a bow, have him use it for a month, and then it sits in his garage, sits in his basement for the next couple of years. Um, I want you to start that journey and start that path. So it's all about helping you find a community, whether that's you're going to start bow hunting and you got some buddies that are going to show you the ropes and take you out, or you've got land, or I want to shoot competitively indoors, in kind of like a U.S. Olympic format, or I want to get into 3D archery, something, or I've got a group of guys right now. They do a Bible study, and they all show up. They shoot bows for a couple hours, and then they jump into their Bible study. And if I can plug guys into that group as well, something like that, some type of community. Um, that's currently the process. It's all, for the most part, it's one on one. Me with the hero, or sometimes there's multiple heroes. But all of this is intended to grow and become that proving grounds we talked about earlier.
So you're um, finding people by word of mouth or applicants mostly?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say 99% of our heroes are passed to us word of mouth. It's either, um, or it's somebody that I meet in the public. I'll go out and I'll talk about Index and what we're doing, and someone will approach me. Hey, man, I'm a veteran. I've never considered this. We have that conversation, and they become a hero. And then they turn around and say, Hey, I've got this buddy. I served with, or we ride in the Combat Vets Association together, or whatever it is. I think he'd be right for your program, and that's for me. That's the best case scenario because now I have an alumni who, yeah, I'll give your buddy a bow and I'll teach him how to shoot. Now you guys can shoot together. Um, we do get some people will hit us up on Instagram or people will contact us through our website, and they're interested. And in those situations where I have an ambassador in their area, we can make it work. We try to do that. But it's really about, for us as volunteers, getting out into our community and selecting the right people and then having those people kind of build that referral network.
Yeah. Where's the majority of your donations coming from? Are you doing fundraisers or just people making benevolent donations to your nonprofit?
Yeah, so it's been so we became an official nonprofit in 2022. And I'll say up until last year, we were 100% supporter driven, right? So we have it's still small, but I love it and it's growing, and we have this community on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll pop a fundraiser up there, and not only are they donating money, but they are also donating equipment. Guys will have a 2-year-old bow, they upgrade their bow, and they'll donate it to us. Um, we would do fundraisers at a couple different events that would, people would come by our booth, grab some stickers, hear about us, and then, drop $20 in a bucket type of thing. This year was the first year that we had any major success with grants. So we won a $10,000 grant from the state of Virginia, the Department of Wildlife Resources, and that, really did a lot for us. Future, I would love to start building some corporate sponsorships, and the goal that I have for this proving grounds is very ambitious. We're going to need millions of dollars to purchase the property and build it out the way we need to, and then maintain that. So that's going to come, I think, from some type of corporate sponsorship. Then on the flip side, as far as equipment goes, we have some really great partners and sponsors from the archery community. Matthews Archery is our bow sponsor for this year, so we're pretty much getting bows at cost from them, which is it's incredible. And then we get a lot of free stuff from, I'm wearing the shirt right now, True Ball. This is a Virginia-based company, but they give us archery releases. I've got a buddy out in Wisconsin that runs one of the largest sight manufacturers in the world. I had a phone call with him one day, and he's just like, "Hey, who gives you guys your sights?" And I'm like, "Well, we just buy them. We don't have a sponsor." And he's like, "You do now. You guys never have to worry about buying a bow sight ever again." Um,
Who's that in Wisconsin here?
So that's Chris Ham with HHA Archery or HHA Sports. Yeah. And he also has a nonprofit. It's called HHA USA, and he hosts 3D shoots and these like get-togethers and rallies for veterans and first responders. Those are some pretty cool events, all around Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So yeah, monetarily, like I said, it's been majority supporter driven, and hopefully in the future we get some more grants. And as far as materials goes, the archery community has been outstanding in the industry itself. So we've been very, very fortunate.
How's this process of setting this up from going from just shooting arrows in your backyard by yourself to now you're teaching people? That's got to improve your skills as well. But how has this changed well, first what you were going through, but then your perspective on what other people are going through, this whole to now you're, starting to see this rise now.
Yeah. Well, that's where uh, that flattery and that humbleness come into play, right? Because on one aspect of it, um, you know, I, I I knew from the beginning, from my own experiences, that this could be helpful for people. But watching the success after success, when it comes to the heroes we work with, it's yeah, again, I always go back to like I knew it could work because of me, but now the proof is in the pudding, right? And we just show time and time again that this is improving people's mental wellness and it's changing lives. Um, but for I'm stuck in this mindset of like, who am I? You know, because and this is not that big of a deal, but yesterday I had to get my truck worked on, and my exhaust needed to be fixed. I take it into the shop, they fix it, and they've been supporters of Index for the last like 3 years. So I'm going to leave, and I'm like, hey, what do I owe you? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, you do so much for other people. Let us do something nice for you. And it even right now, like that type of shit makes me emotional because again, who am I? I'm just a dude, man. I'm just a dude who likes archery and found out that it helped my mental health, and I'm trying to share that with as many people as possible. Um, and the fact that it has been effective and the fact that we do have this support absolutely blows me away. Um, but I'm just a dude at the end of the day. So, where I'm going with that, I guess, is I hope that that encourages people. If you're listening to this, if you want to make a difference or whatever, like if you got ideas, just start something and make it exist, and then you can make it good later. But you don't have to be some billionaire philanthropist to make an impact. You can be just a dude with a bow and see where that takes you. Um, yeah, I know that was a little bit rambly, but I hope that answers your question.
Well, you're right. And it's not a competition either to do the greatest amount or the flashiest amount of good. Like there's no end state. We're not in competition with each other. Just
Hmm.
want to do good for people, do the right thing the right way, the best way you know how. And that might adjust over time as you gain, as we said, more perspective, more empathy for how other people do things and be able to help out wherever you can. And, your reach will grow. Just from this little show, the reach has grown. I love when people message me. They're like, "Oh, I got more traffic." I'm like, "That's awesome, great, man." Okay, because I'm just talking. I'm just talking. But I've realized people find that difficult to do, and it is difficult. But the more you practice at it, the more like you shoot a bow, the more you go shoot a gun or anything, you'll get better at it, and you'll be able to string more thoughts together and you'll learn and you'll get better at what you're doing, and then that'll get easier, and then you'll be able to do other things. I wrote down, I remember from one of my TBI appointments, right? They're like, you got to do new things, like write with your left hand or brush your teeth with
Hmm.
your left hand or so. So this for you guys, for the archery portion, you're getting people to do something that they've never done before. And that gets all this shit up here working
It
and
does, yeah,
getting
absolutely.
new neural pathways. And have you looked into that portion of going,
I
hey
have.
guys, you're not only going to be a better shot, you're going to get a little bit smarter. Mix some creatine in there and a workout regimen. We're on our way here.
Yeah, so those are the conversations we have, and that's the life changes that we're hoping to inspire in people, and it all starts with a bow, right? But it's so much more than a bow. So you're right. As we get older, as our brains age, your brain when you're young is filled with all these neural pathways and all these neural connections, and as we get older, those connections kind of separate, and so that is what's recommended is, if you're over 40, learn a new skill, and a lot of people say, um, learning an instrument because our most people know our brain is kind of split in two, and I think it's the right half of your brain controls the left side of your body, and vice versa. Um, and there's this bridge, yeah. There's this bridge in between them, right? But when you do an activity like playing an instrument, or there's a lot of different things you can do, archery is one of them, that requires that whole body concept. It strengthens that bridge and it helps build new neural pathways. And um, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that happen with our brain that blows me away. Um, and dude, I mean, I barely got a college degree, so if I can understand some of this stuff, I think just about anybody can. But um, yeah, it's very cool. So not only are we teaching you how to shoot a bow, but we're improving your brain health, not just your mental health, but your brain health. And there's a lot of positive impacts that go with that.
Yeah, and I tell people at the gym all the time, if it starts sounding too complicated, just disregard it, right? If it,
Hmm.
more simple you can go in the beginning, like, all right, we're just shooting a bow. There's a lot, but there's some complicated shit that happens in your body. And I tell people with the weights, just stick with bench, squat, and deadlift, and then a couple other things on the side of that. And you'll probably be more successful than other people. Just pick up heavy weight and
Hmm.
move it correctly and simply, and you'll do this. So, a lot of these things, you're like, if it sounds too simple, you're like, that won't work. We're more inclined to think these complicated avenues of treatment um, or workout plans or health plans or mental health, all these, it needs to be complicated. No, it's simple. These simple things, they work. And that's why they stick around for so long, and all this other complicated shit falls to the side. So I, the simplicity of a lot of these things is very appealing to me. That's what I'm trying to get back to, even in my workout. The other day, I'm like, we're going to start completely over. We're going to go back to the basics as a beginner and start working on form and technique. And we're going to get real strong. And sounds like what you're setting up with the heroes that you have come out to work with you.
Yeah, and you're right. On the simplest form of it, archery's stupid simple. You got a stick and a string, and you put an arrow in, you pull it back, and you let it go. Um, but then from there, as you start doing that, you start learning the complexities. And then another great thing about archery is there's all these rabbit holes you can go down. And one of those, because one of the effects for a lot of people of a post traumatic stress injury is hyperfixation. I'm one of those guys. I can hyperfixate very easily. So something like building arrows, you take a carbon shaft, and first you have to determine how stiff you want that shaft, because whenever you shoot a bow, the first thing that happens is that arrow is going to flex when it comes off the string. So you find the right stiffness. You don't, the stiffest one possible is not always the best one. You want to optimize that. Then you cut it down to the right length. Um, or even before that, you're looking at the thickness of the walls of that arrow to say, how much weight do I want? How many grains per inch do I need to achieve this build that I'm going for? Then do I need to put a wrap on the back of it? Do I need a certain weight in my nock? How many vanes or fletchings do I want? What type of componentry do I want on the front of that arrow? How much weight there, and what type of projectile am I using? Am I using a fixed blade broadhead? Am I using a mechanical broadhead? Is this a competitive arrow and I'm just using field tips? You could, there's millions of combinations you can go down, and you could really hyperfixate on just building your arrows. Um, and you can do that on a rainy day. Hey, I can't shoot today, but I can work on arrows. And again, now I'm not thinking about anything else other than what I'm doing right now. Got some music in the background. I'm sitting in my garage. It's raining, and I'm building a dozen custom arrows, and I'm having the time of my life doing it. It's incredible. And all this started for me as I was just going to mentor guys. Me and my co-founder. Because obviously I've got some combat related trauma. My co-founder, um, he was also an investigator in the Air Force, and a lot of his job for like 12 years was investigating crimes against children. Not only that, he was a child forensic interviewer. And I think I keep saying this, I need to just find out what the answer is. But I think at the time, there's only like 3 in the entire Air Force. We're working cases worldwide, right? So he had a 1 in 3 chance if there was a child sex crime committed, an actual contact crime on a victim, that he was going to have to interview that child. That's heavy, heavy shit. That's staring straight into the darkness and dancing with the devil every day. And you know what they say, right? You stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss is going to look back. You're dancing
Nietzsche.
with the devil. You're dancing with the devil. He's going to grab your hand in 2 steps. So Ray, unknown to me, we were kind of on parallel journeys where archery started helping him as well. And when I left active duty, I'm the type of guy just fade into the shadows. I don't want to go on a way. I don't want any fanfare. Like, I did my time. I'm a dirty reservist now. It is what it is. But that wasn't good enough for him and some of my buddies, so they actually came to Pinehurst, North Carolina, and surprised me. And we're just sitting on my porch one day. We're drinking some bourbon, or one night, and he asks me, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "You know what, dude? Like, archery's kind of been my thing, and I lived in a cul-de-sac, and every house around the cul-de-sac, they all shot bows. Like I'm moving in day one, and I was wearing an archery T-shirt, and this guy comes over. He's like, "Oh, you shoot bows?" I'm like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "Cool, me too. So does that guy. That guy right there. He's a professional shooter." And we just had like one of our yards was always an archery range. So I'm telling Ray this, and he's like, "You know what, dude? Me too." And we probably talked for 6 hours that night. We stayed up till like the sun came up, just talking about how archery was helping us. So when we launched Endex, it was just supposed to be mentorship. Hey, we're just going to introduce people to archery. And the first person that I introduced, I'm telling them all about archery. They're like, okay, well, I guess I need to buy a bow. So we go to the bow shop, and archery is a lot like, well, I guess it's like it's anything in our world, right? You look at guns, you look at golf equipment, fishing equipment. There's like an entry point, and then there's a high end line and the bougie stuff. And for a lot of veterans, first responders, right, people who have relied on quality gear to potentially save their life, and as a tool of the trade, we value quality gear. So most of us walk into a bow shop and we say, "No, I want the best thing I can get. Like, what is the top of the line bow?" Um, well, that's going to cost you for a full setup probably around 3 grand. So about the third person that I watched spend, upwards of 2 grand, 3 grand on their setup, I'm like, this sucks. This is tearing my heart out because now I'm watching them spend all this money on something that at the time I knew worked for me. I wasn't sure it was going to work for them. So I told Ray, like, dude, if we're going to keep doing this, then we need to be paying for it. We need to find a way to fund 100% of the equipment that they need to get started. And that started with people donating used equipment. And um, we never gave out anything super shabby, but we may have some of our early projects may have been stuff that it wasn't the nicest equipment. And now, just 3 years later, we're giving out everything we hand out is almost, brand new. We got brand new bows, brand new sights, brand new releases, brand new arrows. Um, so it really was like, hey man, I can't watch people spend their own money on this. We've got to do this ourselves.
Good, man. Fuck yeah. I mean, it's got to be super rewarding in itself to just see that, to get to that point, the whole evolution of the process. But, like the evolution of the process, and I say it many times on the show, it's selfishness and selflessness are two sides of the same coin. It helps you because it helps them. But, you know, this whole process, now we're going to go how to go back all the way to the beginning. Like, because this, you had your time in the Air Force, and then you did some secret squirrel shit, and everybody has bad times, and now you've gotten to a place where it sounds like you're in a good place doing good things for good people. But what got you
Yes.
all started on this process? Because you didn't, I assume when you were a little kid running around in the yard, you didn't want to be in the Air Force security forces.
Well, I fell for the Air Force's or the government's like a long term recruitment strategy, right? So as a 6 year old, I remember my dad bringing me over to some of his friends. He was a career law enforcement officer, and he's like, "Jay Bird, tell him what you're going to be when you grow up." And I had the plan figured out. I was going to be a naval aviator, because I was born in the '80s, child of the '90s, Top Gun, video games, war movies were big. I wanted to be a naval aviator. So that was the plan from a very early age. And because of that, I was drawn to scouting because, I found out as a young child, hey, if you become an Eagle Scout, then the military is automatically going to give you rank when you join. Um, so that was my motivation. And I love the outdoors, growing up in the swamps of South Louisiana, hunting and the outdoor culture is just kind of part of life. Um, so I couldn't wait to join the military. I joined delayed enlistment um, between my junior and senior year of high school, and it's all I wanted to do. And the first time I got to put on that uniform, it's a parallel because my brother's a musician. Um, he's actually there's a guy named Josh Foster that just plays second on American Idol, and he's touring. He's from Louisiana. My brother is playing guitar in his band. My brother had his own record deal, lived out in California, so he would describe walking out into a packed stadium, and all these screaming fans. And that was, feeling like a rock star. And I remember putting on my uniform for the first time, like after basic and after tech school, you get to your first base and you're signing, you're showing up to arm up for the day, and it's just like, fuck, I feel like a rock star. I'm doing it. Um, I'm I call a lot. I got a lot of shit from the guys on the One's Ready podcast because, like, there's a lot of guys who come in and they talk about all the negative stuff about the military. Man, I'm just like a fountain of positivity. I don't regret a single thing about my military career, every step along the way. Even, my first contract for the Air Force was supposed to be under Air Force Special Warfare, Special Tactics. I was going to be a SEER specialist, and decided in basic training that I didn't want to be, because I found out that they were kind of just instructors, especially early on. I was like, I don't want to be an instructor. I thought, I already thought of myself as a snake eater. I'm here to cut the head off the snake of terror. And you're at Lackland Air Force Base for basic, and you see these guys running around with body armor, and they've got rubber duckies. But at the time, I was inexperienced enough to think they were real guns. And I'm like, who are those dudes? And they've got a lot of like t-shirts and sweatshirts hanging up in the PX right next to the basic training dorms, and they steal everything from the Green Berets. So, it's the skull with the snake going through the eye and coming out the mouth, and he's got his blue security forces beret on, and it just looks badass. I'm like, I want to be one of those guys. And it turns out, I mean, that's a really great career field. There's a lot of opportunities there. For me, that job sucked. You show up, you've got that rock star moment. You're like, I am ready. It's like that 21 Jump Street scene where Jonah Hill looks over at Channing Tatum. He's like, you ready for a lifetime of being badass motherfuckers? And then it goes to the next scene and they're like riding bicycles through the park. That's what it was for me, man. Like, I'm a defender. I've got qualifications on the 203, the 240 Bravo, the 249, M4, you name it, I can shoot it. And then they hand me, my first day on post, they hand me a 249. Here's an ammo can full of extra rounds. Now you're going to sit in this F-150 on the flight line for 12 hours and like make sure no one steals a plane. You're just like, oh, this is life.
What did I get myself into?
Yeah. Yeah. Every now and then, I got to work a law enforcement patrol and go break up a bar fight or something like that. I got to watch our canine handler release a dog once on somebody that was running from us. And, the dog, I think it knocked them out of their shoes. So there's some cool stuff, but, I'm humble brag. I'm a pretty smart guy, so I'm a new airman, and they realize like, hey, this dude's halfway competent. We're going to make you an IDS monitor. So we had this secure compound on base. And they put me in this room behind this wall of monitors, and you see all these little sensors in these doors. You got like a blueprint of the building, and you can see what doors are opening. And there were certain ones where when guys needed to enter that room, it had to be two of them. They'd had to call me, pass me a code. I give them a code back, and then I can unlock the door and they can go in. And my first year and a half in the Air Force, that was my life, man. Like if we would work like 4 days on, 2 days off. Usually 3 out of those 4 days I was stuck in that room. And for sometimes it'd be months where they're like, we don't have another IDS monitor. So you're getting called in on your day off, and you're just stuck in this room for 12 hours a day. And I was like, this job sucks.
So comparable, is this comparable to an Army MP, or is it different some way? What?
Yes and no. So obviously core duties. So security forces used to be two separate career fields under one umbrella, and then they kind of merged them. So you have your provost marshal duties, right? You have that law enforcement mission, but then you also have the security mission that is typically handled by the infantry, right? You've got an army base somewhere, especially deployed. You've got a bunch of 11 Bravos or combat arms personnel guarding that base, holding the perimeter. So it's in the Air Force, it's the security forces guys that man the M2 and the Mark 19s and man the towers and do your 500 meters outside the wire patrols and all that stuff, in addition to that traditional law enforcement mission. So that's why I say there are those opportunities. There's a whole Air Force Security Forces unit down at Moody Air Force Base that does no law enforcement work whatsoever. Their day-to-day job is training. They're doing, they're doing combatives, they're doing mount training, CQB. I think 100% of the unit, if you're deployable, then you're airborne qualified. So their job is, we have to reinvade Afghanistan in a year. some soft element, or probably 75th Ranger Regiment is going to parachute in and go retake Bagram Airfield. Well, either in conjunction with them or right on their heels, you're going to have these guys from the 820th Security Forces jumping in to then take over security operations for that airfield, so that the Army can then project out and go do the combat mission. Um, so with that comes, we send guys. The Air Force Security Forces will send guys to Army Sniper School, though we don't, per doctrine, employ snipers in the Air Force, but we do employ counter snipers. And that goes back to the Vietnam War, where the North Vietnamese were shooting out the engines of our F4s and our helicopters and stuff like that. So you can become sniper qualified. You can um, you could dive more into the law enforcement route, and you can get certified as a patrolman. You can go become a corrections officer. You can go to airborne school. I've known security forces, they call themselves defenders. I've known those guys, some of those guys, to go to Halo school. um, and then in some cases, there's select units that will embed a couple of these guys because they are security experts. And then you got the route that I chose. So combat arms is responsible for all of the firearms training for the entire Air Force, and the firearms maintenance. So you become a maintainer and an instructor, and you play with guns all day, every day. And it was the best job that I ever had. It was so much fun.
There's a lot of cans. You can do this, you can do that, you could do this, but you did get stuck in a room for how long? Staring at a monitor?
Yeah, that was like I said, that was probably the first year and a half of my career. Um, the majority of that was stuck in that room looking at a monitor, and it's very similar. Again, you can get sent out to the missile fields, and my wife, she was also security forces, and that was her fate. She got sent to Montana, and her job was to guard nuclear missile silos. Um,
I hear that's a lonely, lonely gig.
Lonely gig, and again, we've got guys out there. There's this team, you would consider it SWAT like. They're tactical response force, and they fly around on Hueys. They a lot of them are air assault qualified, and a lot of high speed training. But it's like, when's the last time someone tried to breach a nuclear facility? And never, that I know of.
I don't think
Um,
we'd hear about it if they did.
yeah, so it's a lot of training and very little action. And of course, you hope you're never needed. I hope no one is trying to access a nuke. Um, So you get a lot of guys that get fired up and get some really high level training, and then don't get to put that training into practice. But that's the other thing that I like to caution people about. I know I'm on a bit of a tangent right now, but I was one of those guys that romanticized war, right? And it's like, you can't wait to get into your first tick, and you know, you just want it to happen. And I think part of it is that macho bravado. I think part of it is what, the mentality the military rightfully instills in you. You're a trained killer. Um, and then I think part of it is true professionals, in the profession of arms, have the desire to test themselves. They want to go through that inferno because you have spent years of your life training to be capable, and you want to know, am I actually good enough? I think I'm good enough. I think I know I'm going to respond to contact, but I want to learn that about myself. And I tell people that that could be a slippery slope, because from being that guy who wanted to see action, and then having to carry six of my friends in a coffin. Um, I don't wish that on anybody. I hope there are no more wars, because I've seen the ugly side of that and what it does to people. And there's always going to be those people that are like, yeah, man, I love getting into firefights. Um, I'm not one of them, and I think most people who have been in a firefight say they're fine never getting shot at again. Uh, so it's just a caution.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some of that indoctrination with the training, right? Because if you train at something, if the military trains you to do something, you're more likely to want to do it. Like, oh, we're going to send you out to the range, and um, you can do this. This is something that can happen. And you're not going to hesitate when it comes up. That's what training is. You're getting your brain to say, we shouldn't be doing this. Instead, you just act on it. situation
Yeah.
comes up. But man, you stick somebody out on an airfield for 15 months, 12 on, 12 off with a machine gun, they are going to be itching to use that thing after an hour, and oh shit,
Yeah.
shit, we got 14 months and 30 days left until this is over. But that's what some deployments were like for people. So,
Absolutely.
everybody's got a different perspective on things. I never got to go, so I have no experience or place. I don't have any point of reference either. So it's all just all training and exercises and things like that. So yeah, it's that's rough. And some guys, yeah, thing. I mean, I asked the questions at the end. One guy's like, "Yeah, I'd like to go back to my first firefight." Yeah, and then some people completely different answers and things like that. So it's all different. It's to the person and their experience and what they went through. And some, not all deployments are created equal. And I think that is one. I don't know if it's a misconception, but definitely from the civilian perspective, all deployments are the same. They're all lumped in
Right.
to the
Right. And
same.
I think, some of the negative consequences of that, as you see, well, throughout the recent Tim Kennedy thing, or um, people think they need that hero story. Oh, I served in the military. If I never deployed or whatever it is, a lot of people feel like they've got to make something up because that's what society expects of them. We do ourselves a disservice there, because just raising your hand and volunteering to serve your country is enough. Like, that's something to be proud of. No one needs to make things up. Um, but the other, you know, unintended consequence of what you were just talking about, is, yeah, you do feel ready. And we never think of the worst case scenario. We think, because of my training and because of my unit, whatever, we're going to go into this firefight and we're just going to, lay waste to these dudes out here, the Taliban, whatever. They're a bunch of dirt farmers, they're unsophisticated military, and we're just going to wipe the floor with them. You don't think that the guy who sleeps in the bunk next to you is not going to be here tomorrow, you know? Um, and that's where it really hit me, is it's like, what an asshole I am. Like, I went on these deployments and I wanted this, I wanted action. I wanted the test. Um, and now my buddy's not here. Never thought that would occur. Um, and it rocks you, man. At least it should, if you're human, if you're not a psychopath, that type of stuff should affect you. But yeah, so moving on. So I became a combat arms instructor. Um, or as a regular security forces guy, I got my first deployment to Afghanistan. I got to do a mission we call flyaway security. So I got to wear a flight suit, arm up, fly all around the country and all the neighboring countries. And basically, anytime an Air Force asset landed outside of an established perimeter. So supporting soft, sometimes you'd be landing in the middle of the desert and dropping off a team of really badass dudes. Or one time we flew in the middle of the night, we landed in the desert, and two guys got on our plane. Have no idea who they were. They could have been agency, whatever. These two dudes were just out there alone and unafraid. They jumped on our plane and we took off again. So,
What kind of plane are
uh,
we talking about?
all of my missions were on Hercs C-130H models, or a couple J models, but yeah, just cargo planes. So a lot of our missions were either, we'd fly into, again, some fob out in the middle of nowhere or some little combat outpost, and we'd land in the desert and we'd offload, 3 containers full of supplies, and we'd take off. Other times we'd be flying in somewhere and we'd drop. I was there in '09, so the Marine Corps was doing their search down south. So, we were flying south of Kandahar and we'd drop off 60 devil dogs and they'd jump off the plane and go about their business. Sometimes we were doing dignitary transports. There was actually a really cool mission. We flew to Pakistan and we picked up these dudes in business suits. And as we're flying home, I pull out. I had one of the first like iPods that could play movies. So you're looking at it on like a 2-inch by 2-inch screen. But I'm watching Charlie Wilson's War. I've got my headphones in, and this guy taps me on the leg. He's like, "What are you watching?" We're yelling because obviously the C-130 is super loud. And I'm like, "Oh, it's Charlie Wilson's." And he's like, it's the scene. I'm watching the scene where the Green Beret is playing chess in the park. And he's got his back turned. He's talking to the congressman, but he's playing chess with like 4 tables behind him. And the dude I'm talking to, he goes, "That guy, and he's pointing at the Green Beret or former Green Beret on the screen. He's like, that guy is him. And so the dude that we had picked up from Pakistan was the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and he was portrayed in this movie. That was his background. So it's just like, how surreal is that? That's wild.
Did you investigate that afterward?
Yeah, yeah. I went and looked up the guy. Like, look, who was the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence? His picture came up, and then I looked into the story of Charlie Wilson's war, and yeah, that's what it was. He was a former Green Beret. I think he was working for the agency. But it's when they were looking to start equipping the Taliban. They basically went to this guy because he was like a former 11 Bravo or 18 Bravo, sorry. And they're like, hey, what do we need to give the Mujahideen for them to be effective and shoot down these Russian hinds? And he's like, you need Stinger missiles or whatever. So he kind of built the plan for how they were going to arm the Mujahideen back in the 80s. And then from there had just a successful career, I think, with the agency. And then, like I said, became the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence.
So you guys are all kitted up, but the pilots and all that, they're running taxi all over the combat zone, and you guys are
Mhm.
there in case anything kicks off, and you don't know who you're picking up. Like you're picking up, I assume you're picking up spooks, and then you said, you're dropping off Marines as well, and just going all over. Is there any semblance of a schedule, or is it all right? We got this to do now. Oh, we got that. Now we're just all over the place.
Yeah, yes and no. So it was cool. Again, I was an E3 when I got there. I pinned on E4 during the deployment, became a team leader. But like, I'm this young airman, and I have a cell phone in Afghanistan, which like at that time just really didn't happen. Um, we were basically on 24/7 standby. So you would have, the Air Force is pretty good at scheduling their flights, and we'd have this board we had to check every day, and you knew what your upcoming missions were. Sometimes out to like a week, you could plan your schedule, but um, I'd say probably a quarter of the time, my cell phone would ring, and it's like, hey, there's a no notice mission. They need security. You're up, and then you would grab your kit, head of the flight line. It didn't matter what you were doing. Um, and that was one of the benefits for them, but shitty part for us because there is a section in Air Force Security Forces called the Phoenix Raven program, and it falls underneath the Air Force's Air Mobility Command. So when you become a Phoenix Raven, um, you're treated like air crew, which means that you're entitled to crew rest. So pilots, load masters, all these things, all these guys, there's only a certain amount of hours. It's mandated. They have to have so much rest and so many flight hours. We didn't fall under that program. We were just knuckle draggers. So there was one time where I flew a scheduled mission, got back. I think I was grabbing chow. My phone rings. No notice mission. Everyone else is already on mission. So I turn around. I go fly another mission. Get back, and this kept happening. It happened like 3 times in a row, and I finally had to go to like my leadership and like, hey, I haven't slept in over 48 hours. Like I keep getting pulled out for these missions. Like I need a break. Um, it's pretty wild.
I can see that happening, though. It's like,
Yeah,
fuck them. They'll just deal with it, and
yeah.
that's how the military is going to be.
But it was also, like my mentality. I was very much I bled blue, right? And it was very mission first. There was actually one incident. I just had a battle with the VA over this one. Because we're flying around in Hercs. You've got no defenses. If you're getting shot at, your defense is to bank left, bank right, pop some flares, and it's like you're in a slow moving school bus in the sky. You just fucked. Um, so we had just taken off from Bagram on one of these missions, and we had cleared the mountains. We got engaged by an RPG or some type of surface to air missile. But it's my understanding it was on airburst mode. So it didn't hit the plane. It blew up underneath us, but it created an air pocket or something. So the plane kind of did a dip, something like 200 feet. Well, I'm not strapped in because on this particular mission, we had some contractors and we had some Afghan National Army with us. So I'm not only doing ground security, but I'm also doing in-flight security to prevent any, um, you know, green on blue attacks. So when this plane drops, I instantly become, Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, and I float up into the air. I remember hitting. There was like strapped above me where I was sitting. There was like a ladder, a folding ladder strapped to the top of the C-130. So I float up and I hit that thing. And then when we kind of stabilize, I come back down and I land on all fours on the bottom of this plane, which is like, sheet metal. So I'm in this like crouch position. I'm just kind of like, oh fuck, because my knees are screwed up. Like I feel it in my hands. I messed up. And at the time, the plane started filling up with smoke. We didn't know what it was. Afterwards, we realized there's these containers above the landing gear inside the C-130, and it holds hydraulic fluid. Well, we're flying in planes that have been used since Vietnam, right? So the cap's not on it or whatever. Some of this hot hydraulic fluid shoots out and it lands on like the AC ductwork that runs down the side of the plane, and it creates all this steam. So the plane's filling up what we think is smoke, but it's really just steam. But anyway, there's this KBR contractor, the civilian woman. She's a big old girl, and she throws off her seatbelt. She screams, "We're going down!" And like I don't know where she's running to, but she's just in a panic mode. So my partner like tackles her back into the seat. I'm getting back to my feet, and I help him strap her back in. But this whole time, now the plane is banking, and we're going to make a combat landing back into Bagram. So pilots are coming in hot, planes filling up with steam. I think they're having to land under like oxygen masks and stuff. Visibility was kind of messed up. But when we hit the flight line, we hit really hard. I think it actually broke the plane. So I was compressed down into the floor again, which wound up messing up my hips, messing up my back. I felt like I got hit by a truck. So we land, they open the back door, everybody gets off the plane, aircrew comes and inspects it. The aircraft commander comes over to me and my buddy, and he's like, "Hey, are you guys okay?" He's like, "The loadmaster says y'all got thrown around back there a little bit." And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, technically you're allowed to go to med group. You're allowed to go get checked out. But we're going to be getting a new aircraft. The mission's still going to go on. But it has to get scrapped if you guys can't go. Like if you go to med group and they say you can't fly, then we're scrapping the mission." So him and I are both like, "No, we're fine. Like we'll go on the mission." And unbeknownst to me, that started problems that compounded throughout my career. I've got 3 herniated discs. I've got aciotubular impingement in my hips. And it all goes back to that. I don't want to say an aircraft crash, but that incident.
No, he shouldn't have said that. He shouldn't have said that. He probably knows today he shouldn't have said that.
Right. Yeah. No.
That mission didn't matter. Didn't not matter one little bit. And
Right.
you don't give somebody the option. He's the commander. He goes, "Okay, do you need to go to medical?" You can't give him the option to not go. It's you guys probably
Yeah.
would have said no anyway, but you can't say we're gonna scrap the mission if you guys get yourselves taken care of. Fucking uh,
Yeah. As a senior NCO now, my response to a situation like that would be these 2 young airmen. Hey, go to medical. Not an
yeah,
option. Like you're going. You got thrown around
yeah.
an airplane. Um, but there was some excitement there. We got engaged quite a few times. We were flying into one airfield one time. I think it was either Sharana or Salerno, whichever one Bergdahl escaped from. But we were flying in there one time, and we're making our final into the base. We're about to land, and we feel some bumps, and we would wear headsets and everything so we could talk with the crew. And I remember the pilot saying like, "Oh, that was quite a bird strike," because you could feel it when a bird hit the plane. So we land and he goes to check it out, and there's always like a smear. And no, there was bullet holes in the bottom of our C-130. We're flying over some mud hut, and some Afghan goes out there and shoots at us with an AK. Um, there was another time where a dude was building um, an explosive to try to throw over a fence. And the protocol is anytime the aircraft comes under contact or is in danger, the aircraft leaves and the 2 security guys stay on the ground and fight it out. So we're kind of like sacrificial. And that's what happened here. We suspected that this dude was trying to do something, so we told the aircraft to take off. And then when we started approaching him, he ran off. We called the army, who had a patrol nearby. So when they came through and went to the village, they did find an explosive device that this dude had in like a big ass bowl. So we thought that he was just going to try to throw it over the fence when we were taking off. Um, yeah. So first trip to Afghanistan, became a combat arms instructor. Got deployed again, this time to Saudi Arabia, which was both good and bad. Because my mentality as a young airman was, people are dying in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I'm over here in Saudi Arabia, relatively safe. We have a pool on base. I can have 2 beers a night type of thing. But it was my first opportunity because by that point I'd put on E5, so now I'm an NCO. And it was my first opportunity to lead troops. And in the Air Force, our structure, there's very few career fields where you were truly leading troops. Um, and getting to be that mentor and having that combat mindset, doing mission planning and op orders and stuff. So that was it was a good growing moment for me. But that started that transition for me where it's like, all right, security forces, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, but in order to take advantage of those, it's a lot of right place, right time. We have a special operations component called Dagger, and these guys do kind of that uh, flyaway security type mission, but on a whole nother level, and they get to go to some really cool schools. What's not something you can apply and go to selection for. If you're assigned to a base that's under the Air Force Special Operations Command, so like Hurlburt Field or Cannon Air Force Base, um, then you can try out locally to become a Dagger member. But a guy sitting at New Mexico, or at the time I was in Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, I don't stand a chance. I can't go try out for that. I can't try out for the 820th. You get orders there, and now you're going to airborne school. Um, so my mindset shifted. I had some buddies at the time who were combat controllers and TAC Ps, and I looked at going that special operations route, but ultimately found OSI, the Office of Special Investigations. Um, and I'm really glad I decided to go that route. It was a good career for me. Um, and for my mentality, one, I developed a greater respect and love for the law enforcement mission and what we do. But the counterintelligence mission that OSI does, was really my thing. And I got to be kind of that perfect blend of, tactician and spooky guy, right? You get to blend those two worlds. Um, that led to an assignment at a special missions unit towards the end of my career, and ultimately why I stepped away from active duty. Because to me, I felt like I was at the pinnacle of my career. And the idea of going back to the regular Air Force after that. I mean, imagine, a guy in your situation, you do all this work, you go through all this training, you're working with some of the best, and they're like, hey, man, we're actually going to send you back to be an 11 Bravo, or, um, maybe even a fate worse than that. Hey, man, you're going to be a staffer at just the big green army. And you're like, no, I'm not leaving this world.
I was given the option during my medical retirement to try and fight to stay in. And I don't know what decision I would make now, because now I don't care. But then I said, I was like, no, if I can't be this, then I wouldn't have been able to stay anyways, I don't think. And they said that
Yeah.
as well. They're not supposed to, but they, I don't think they were very confident in me being able to stay in to go do anything in other ways. But I probably would take it now, but that time has passed. But
Yeah, putting ourselves aside, but your mindset at the time when you're working at the tip of the spear, it's like this. Now that I know this exists, I don't want to be anywhere else.
I don't know if I was at the
Uh,
tip. I was somewhere I was somewhere on the spear. I was
yeah,
assisting people in the spear. Um, but I don't know if I was at the tip. We're somewhere on the handle maybe. But
yeah. Well, and I don't want to portray myself as like some badass operator either. Like I was not an assaulter. I got to do a really cool mission with, again, like I think the best that our Air Force has to offer. Some really impressive individuals, and my mentality. Imposter syndrome was very real for me. I felt like an ant walking around with giants. Um, but I also think I got there because I was good at my job and I was the right person for it. And very just thankful and blessed to have been somewhere on the spear like you.
yeah.
Um,
So I've very few. I actually didn't even look. Very little content on the show for Air Force, but from talking to guys, you guys have some pretty rigorous pipelines to get into to wherever you're going. But it's also, not only is it hard to get to the completion, it's just hard to get to the first starting point. Like if you join the Air Force and you don't think about oh, I want to be a PJ right away. You can't go. There's no going back. Like it's not like because we can just go to selection. If you join the army, you're like this sucks. You can just go to selection and go. That's what I did. But if you join and you get in a couple of years, oh, I want to be a CCT. Oh no, it's over, man. You can't, or at least that was at one point. You're
Yeah,
very
no, I mean it's
restricted.
I think right now they're trying to recruit more and it goes in waves, but typically and like in my experience, so simultaneously I was looking at going to TACP, which is Tactical Air Control Party, the JTACs of the Air Force. Um, I was looking at that and OSI at the same time. And I had a window, you know, because I was still considered a first term airman. So if you're a first term airman, this window opens where you're eligible to retrain. Um, that's the easiest route, but you still have this career field manager. And unfortunately, you know, a job like security forces, I was lucky to get out because that career field, no one wants to do security forces. Um, People are always just getting out of the Air Force, right? So the job is always undermanned. So yeah, man, like you guys, you go to selection, you get the thumbs up, they pretty much have to let you go. Um, the chief over the career field of security forces, you could go through NDOC or some type of pre-selection they have now to be a PJ and special tactics like, yeah, we want this guy. And the chief can say, suck it. I don't have enough people. I'm not releasing him. And then so your window closes and it becomes exponentially harder for you to retrain or cross train or whatever they're calling now, but get into a new career field. Um, yeah, it's not an easy process.
So
So for me, when it comes to OSI, you know, because that's kind of a natural track. Guys go into security forces, they do enjoy the law enforcement stuff, they want to do more. So it's like, all right, well now I'll go and join OSI, which is like the FBI of the Air Force. So it's like a local cop becoming a Fed, which you see all the time. Security forces will release three, at least when I did it, they were releasing 3 airmen per quarter. So 12 a year to go and be able to retrain into OSI. And you're
how
competing
generous.
with, yeah, you're competing with potentially hundreds of defenders who also want to be OSI. Um,
What's the draw for OSI? I mean, obviously, you said nobody wants to be security forces, so they've all found
yeah,
out once they got there that they don't want to be there. And not saying that's not for everybody. I'm sure somebody listening is very happy in what they're doing,
yeah,
but they didn't get stuck in a room with no lights like you staring at a computer screen for a year and a half.
right. The draw, so OSI, like especially to a new airman or a young airman, one there's the career field is shrouded in mystery, right? You see these guys, they walk around in like suits, looking like federal agents, or you know they're in civvies, they're growing beards. You see some of our deployed mission where we're working with uh, our action arm in Afghanistan was third group or task force. But you're rolling around with these types of guys. Some guys, they're working with SEAL teams, you know, and OSI, we're collecting intelligence, we're building target packages, we're running sources and informants, um, and ultimately doing killer capture packages, you know. So we're building these robust packages and then handing it off to a direct action arm to go and action that. Or, you know, in our case, later on in the war, we were in the ops center, you know, on the soft compound, and you know we're drone striking terrorists. You know, so like it's a really cool freaking job. On the law enforcement front, you know, you attend the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, so that's the same schoolhouse that every federal agency except for the FBI, the DEA, the postal inspectors, and Army CID, all of those agencies have their own school. Everyone else, the U.S. Marshals, the ATF, Homeland Security, the Secret Service, they all go through FLETC. So, you know, when you go through that credentialing course and you get your badge and credentials, you are a federal agent. And that's, if you're into law enforcement, again, you know, you're an E5 MP, security forces guy, whatever, and you're doing law enforcement. You're like, man, I make pennies. I'm doing all this work. I'm going to jump out and I'm going to go be a Fed. I'm going to join the ATF or HSI or the FBI. And in 5 years, you know, I'm making 6 figures and I have this prestigious job. OSI is a gateway to that because you get all the training. So for me, you know, even right now, if I wanted to go back into federal law enforcement and I wanted to join the ATF, I've already got the biggest chunk of the school knocked out. I would just have to go to a short follow on, and I'm an ATF agent. Um,
How do they keep
but
guys then?
they have a hard time. Um, there are people, because it is a very niche agency, and I think it's super cool, right? You you do the job of a federal agent, you do the job of an FBI agent, and I could say this because I did both. I was FBI for 6 years. The subjects that I worked on, the bad guys, sure, that was a little bit different, but the way that I did the job day in and day out was exactly the same. But in the Air Force, you're only focused on that slice of the pie, right? Our authority extends all the way to threats against the United States government, the United States. But really, what we're looking for there is a military nexus, and we're looking for threats within the Air Force and external to the Air Force. But you know, um, people targeting the Air Force mission. So that's what you're investigating. But then again, on the flip side, you've got this counterintelligence mission, and the way that counterintelligence is worked. A lot of our big domestic agencies like the FBI, their goal through the DOJ is prosecutions. They want to take people to court. They want to put them into jail. The way the DoD works, in that world, is very cool, and it's about outcomes. It's operational. Sometimes it's combat oriented. So, I'm not going to try to put a Taliban member in jail. That's a combatant, or ISIS. We're gonna build a target package. We're gonna strike that dude. Um, so if that's what you want to do as a federal agent, OSI is the place to do it, because we're very unique in the fact that we still have active duty military members. So, United States Code Title 10 lawful combatants as special agents, but then you also have civilian special agents. Um, and that comes with a different set of authorities, right? So we can kind of blend those two, and it's just a really cool. It's a really cool federal agency, and it's a really cool job in the Air Force.
Was this advertised while you were in the security forces? Was it just kind of whispers, or was there a flyer up at the MWR? What
No, never a flyer. And OSI recruits, like when you're part of your job as an agent is you're always looking for the next group of agents, and you're looking for those standard out people, those really sharp airmen. You're looking for the best of the best, but you're also looking for people with a certain level of competence and emotional maturity as well. In security forces, you get a lot of exposure to OSI because obviously your security forces guys are your first responders. Um, so you pull a guy over for a DUI, and you find a kilo of cocaine in the back seat. Now that becomes a felony level crime, right? That becomes a federal crime. So your next phone call is to OSI. They're going to take over that investigation, that drug investigation. Um, you respond to a domestic violence call as an Air Force patrolman. So you show up in uniform in your police car, and you walk into the house, and you find out that the wife is, you know, the husband and wife are fighting because he did something inappropriate with a child, or he got caught looking at child porn, something like that, and the wife is ballistic. Again, you're calling OSI because that's now a felony level crime. Um, so you just got to know those guys, and again, they'd show up and they'd be in, an unmarked Tahoe, and they'd jump out and they're in slacks and a button up with their big gold badge and their gun. And you're just like, damn, those dudes look cool. But they have a really good mission.
side side question here? What do you think when you watch NCIS?
It's all those shows are a joke, right? One of my closest friends, he's an OSI reservist, and he's a full time NCIS agent. And I always joke with him like, "How many people did you shoot today?" And he's just like, "Shut up, man," because in every episode, like they're burning some guy down. Um, and that's not the reality for anything, right? I mean, um, you were you were a Green Beret. I'm sure guys who spent
Allegedly.
years without ever even needing to use their gun, right? Police work, it's the same thing. I was in the FBI for 6 years. Did I ever have to shoot anyone? No. Now, did I pull my gun out on guys? Yeah, all the time. But that's just not the reality. And then on the flip side of that, I love this story because when I was a firearms instructor, we had this Air Force JAG. So Maxwell Air Force Base, the JAG school's there. So this dude's a lawyer. He's a major, and this is his first deployment. Goes to Afghanistan. He's working in the base legal office, and he finds out this Army National Guard unit had ripped in. They were at some fob somewhere, and none of them had wills done before they left. So this was a big deal. So they're like, hey, lawyer, you're going to jump on the next resupply convoy going out to this fob, and you're going to write wills for all of these National Guard members. On his way there, IED goes off. They get into a tick. This dude's, he was either in an MRAP or a Humvee at the time, but he jumps out and he's got to engage, and he kills like 9 dudes. This lawyer comes back to home station, and I think he's got a Purple Heart. He's got a Bronze Star with Valor. He's got a Combat Action Medal, and he comes to the range where we work, and he tells us his story, and he wants to thank us because, like, when he showed up, he barely qualified. We had to do a lot of work with him to get him ready and get him competent with the M4 and his M9. But he's like, hey, thank you guys. The training I received from you guys, like, saved my life, and I did all this cool stuff. And we're just like, again, we're a bunch of security forces dudes. We're firearms instructors. We think we're snake eaters, and we're like, this freaking guy, like, this lawyer is out there like dropping bodies, and none of us have ever seen action. That type of stuff happens, right? So it's the same thing in law enforcement. You watch some of the cheesy stuff. The other thing I'll say, man, is like, you watch these TV shows, NCIS or FBI New York, whatever, and they find a severed finger and they put it on this thing, and it's like instantly they've got a thumbprint or whatever. And it's just like, man, when you see the machine get going, especially for the FBI, like this massive machine, and when you see it start rolling, yeah, man, we can do anything. We can find anyone. But sometimes it takes days, weeks, maybe even months to get there. And all these shows are just like, it's instant, you know?
Hey, that fits into the 47 minutes of airtime for an hour episode with commercials a lot better than
Yeah.
it's just, the whole episode would just be one guy going checking with the office. Hey, do we got those results back yet? No. And then that's the end of the episode. Oh, we got to wait 2 more months until next
Yeah,
time. So
exactly.
yeah, I asked the same question. But the show I throw out for like police officers is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I like to take it to full ridiculous, to
Great
where
show.
it's comically ridiculous.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
would say
one.
that one's closer to actual reality just because of like the in-house office antics, right?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
highlight the humor, and everybody I throw that out too. They'll go, "No, I don't watch any of that shit." How about Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Oh, yeah, I watched that one. That one's pretty
Yeah,
funny.
that was good.
So, what was so you had to want to go over there, and then do you get the nod, or do you get invited to some like secret meeting club selection sort of thing, or what's that application process look like, if you can say?
For OSI?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get recruited. Um, and there are opportunities, like if you're questioning the job or something, you can go to the
You
local
say
detachment.
recruited because you said they only release 3. If you're recruited, that doesn't mean you're going to make it, right? Or be
Correct.
released
Yeah.
even. Okay.
Yeah. So once you get recruited, once you get identified, whether it's you walking into OSI and asking for information and building a relationship for there, or they kind of headhunt you and they bring you in and say, hey, we'd like you to join OSI. There's obviously you're looking for people that want to be there. So after those initial conversations, you put in an application. And it's a formal application. You fill out all this information. It goes up to your chain of command. You got to get their approval. And then they start your ASI, which is your agent suitability investigation. So OSI then goes through a process of looking into your background, talking with your chain of command, and if you've been in the Air Force for a little while, maybe had multiple duty stations, they're going back to those, and they just want to get a sense of who you are. Are you competent? Are you trustworthy? Are you a hard worker? Are you reliable? All those things. The other part of that process is you have to be able to obtain a top secret clearance. So they put you in for that. So it really is a long process, but eventually you get to these steps where you'll do an interview with maybe some field agents, and that's kind of it's a competency check, but it's also like a bro check. Like, is this somebody who me as an agent would want to go through a door with? If there's an active shooter, hostage situation, whatever it is, am I comfortable going through the door with this guy or this gal? So then you get a thumbs up there. So then we'll go to the next level in OSI, and uh, you may have the senior enlisted leader in that detachment or something like that. do another interview, and it's, hey, tell me why you want to be an agent. They'll also bring in your spouse, and they'll explain to them the realities of the job. It's like, hey, you're now more deployable. You're now going to be on call. You know, there's a component of the job again where it's law enforcement, right? So you're dealing with human informants, and one of the questions that my wife got asked is like, how are you going to handle it if your husband's phone rings at 2 a.m. and you overhear that it's a female on the other line, you know? And then when you say, hey, who is that? And he says, I can't talk about it. How do you respond? Because that's one of the realities of the job. So they make sure the spouse is on board too. And then from there, you get a final interview with the detachment commander, and they ultimately decide if your package is going to go forward to the command level at OSI, and that's the OSI saying, we want this person, we think that they should get a school date. So from there, then starts the battle with headquarters OSI going back to your career field and saying, hey, we've identified an applicant. We want this person to become an OSI agent. Will you release them from their job to then, go to training? And if you get thumbs up all the way across the board and you get your TS, you get to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and then our own follow-on academy, um, and you get a life of adventure. And some people that hear this, especially if they're OSI agents, they're going to laugh. But for me, it really is, again, I try to stay optimistic, and the stuff that I got exposed to, the training that I got exposed to. And again, there's all these opportunities in OSI you become a forensic science consultant. You can become a cyber investigator. You can specialize in counterintelligence. We have our own, again, SWAT like component since it's law enforcement, right? But it's had many names. But when I was in, it was either a special missions branch or anti-terrorism specialty team. But these are teams of agents who, in most cases go through some type of a vetting and an assessment and selection to then get embedded into either a special OSI detachment that runs adjacent to a special tactics squadron, or in some cases directly embedded into an Air Force Special Tactics Squadron, and you're supporting, those operators there. So a lot of really cool stuff that you can do, and a lot of really cool individuals you meet. You might meet a guy who was an aircraft maintainer, just turning wrenches on C-17s. And then the next thing you know, this guy is reading psychology books and criminology, and he's getting his master's degree or his doctorate as an E5, and he's for whatever reason, he's digging into arson investigations and he's becoming an arson expert. I got to go to a school that was put on by the High Value Detainee Interrogations Group, which is a joint FBI CIA. These are the guys that, had we captured bin Laden alive, it would have been the HIG that interrogated him. They put on a really cool course, and it was a high value, high level interrogations course that I got to go to. Just all kinds of really cool stuff.
That's they don't smoke the shit out of you in the interview process and make you carry heavy rucks for like miles and miles and then tell you how stupid you are? I'm just kidding.
They'll definitely fuck with you during the interview process. And then the academy's no joke. Again, it's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So
that's the training. No, I mean the selection. I'm just joking about it. I mean, training fucking whatever you do, even if it's mental, educational, it still sucks.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for us, no, it's very much a more gentlemanly interviewing process, as far as selecting who becomes an OSI agent, and yeah, you don't need to ruck. There are plenty of guys that do. I rucked, especially because I thought I was going to be a TAC P for a while. And we need some of those types of people in OSI, but we also need people who can't carry a rucksack because they probably offer different sorts of skills. When it comes to investigation, it takes all types to be an effective, investigative agency.
Well, yeah, there's as we said before, there's so many ways to do cool things in the military that nobody's ever heard of, and a lot of those don't deal with like SF selection or combat dive school or Halo and like all the flashy stuff that they record or recruit with. Uh, that's such a small portion of even what we actually do in special operations. It's this
Yeah.
big portion of recruiting, and that's just not the case really at all. Yeah, you get to do some of that stuff, but man, you're at the even on a team as an ODA, you're at your laptop or your computer doing op orders or risk assessments or requests or paperwork. Oof, so much, so
And your
much.
cyber awareness challenge.
Oh God, the one that got me the most was when we had to do what was it, Sear 100. I was like, I've been to Sear. It wasn't
Yeah.
like this. Yeah,
Yeah. We had one for a while that was like a video game. Like you had to actually like move this little character. And I'm like, why am I playing video games? Just give me the training. Um, yeah, but ultimately, at those high level teams, high functioning teams, it's all about being good at your job. And you said you were 18 Charlie. Um, so you're a Green Beret, but I'm sure that there was some back shop commo guy that your 18 Echo loved, because that dude could program a radio with his eyes closed. You know what I mean? And you want that guy to be the best at his job, and he doesn't need Halo Wings or dive school to be the best at programming radios. But damn it, when you guys are going out on a mission, you want to make sure that your commo is squared away. You know, um,
every
I'm
18
sure.
Echo has a 25 series guy that they're best friends with.
Yeah,
That knows
you
all
know,
the shit that he doesn't have to either have time or want to know, whether they want to admit it or not. So
yeah. For a guy like you better have. You would hope that your loggy is like on spot, because if he doesn't give you, the equipment and the demo that you need, you can't do your damn job. Um, so it really is. It doesn't take Halo Wings to be a cool guy. To me, the cool guy is the dude who's a professional and knows his job and is trying to do his job. Um, a lot of guys that I think part of the reason that I got into that last unit that I was in, some of the guys that showed up to me for ANS, um, they were OSI agents, but they were focused on, okay, what are we going to get to do now that we're at this level and we're trying out for this special operations unit? Am I now going to be an operator? And it's like, hey, the Air Force doesn't need an OSI guy to show up and become an operator. They'll just go recruit an operator. There's plenty of TAC Ps, combat controllers, PJs out there. They need you to show up and be a really damn good OSI guy. Um, and it's that mentality, that got me there. And I actually, because I was in that unit, we would get free fall slots and stuff like that. So, it'd come up and they're like, hey man, do you want to go to Halo school? And at first I was like, yes, because coming up through the Air Force, there was still that mystique. It's like if you had all these badges on your chest and people knew you were a cool guy, and Halo Wings was like the coolest of the cool. But as I started to think about it, I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm the OSI guy. If I'm haloing in, everyone else is dead. It's like shit has gone terribly wrong. Like, it's my job to show up in a business suit. Like, I fly commercial to whatever country, and I show up in a business suit and I go do, I go meet with an informant or do whatever it is that we need to do. Um, I'm not the halo in guy. So if I go to this school, I'm now taking a slot from someone who probably needs it somewhere in the military, whether that's another Air Force dude or, an Army guy, Marine, whatever. Like,
nope, nope. Nope, you just passed it off to that JAG officer who's planning on getting out in the next 6 months, and that's not the case. If
well,
you
and
get offered a
if
school,
if
for
that's
those
his
listening at
incentive
home,
school,
if you get offered a school, take that shit because you're just somebody else that deserves it way less is going to get it next, get offered to them next. Take that
yeah,
shit. Volunteer for everything that they give you because it'll get down. That's how, that's how that shit happens. When somebody posts something on the internet and they go, um, the Space Force administrator gets a Ranger tab, right? And everybody in the comments is like, what the fuck did this person get a Ranger tab? Well, that unit got slotted for it, and all these other people probably turned it down until it got to that guy who
yeah,
absolutely doesn't need it. Not saying he didn't. I mean, he did it. Good for him. He completed the school or whatever, but that's how that shit happens is everybody goes, nah, I don't need that or whatever. It's like, yeah, take that shit when it comes up. Do it. If somebody offers it to you, take that shit.
that's good advice. All right, but that was my story. I was just like, I don't need it. Um, I'd rather go to some other spooky school somewhere else and get better at my job and my
Well, that's
craft.
one. That's another thing. If you've got a different option and you want to go to that, but I always take everything that they give you because, and then because now I'm out. I didn't get to do anything. I'm a master driver, man. I can make you a fake license like you wouldn't believe. I'll license you
Yeah.
up on the C-130 as a joke, but
Heck yeah.
I didn't get to do anything. That was the most badass school I ever got to do after I got to my unit was
Yeah.
master driver. That's it. So
That's the other thing about the Air Force. You get a lot of, oh, you were in the Air Force. What did you fly? And I always say M11. And they're like, what's that? And you're like, oh, you just have to look it up, or it's classified. And that was the M11 was the SIG P228 that we carried.
well, I mean, you did fly all the time. You guys, fuck, you go everywhere. That's the one thing about the Air Force, man. You can be everywhere in the same day. Like, oh, these guys up here at Mitchell, the refuelers, the boomers, they'll just go, oh yeah, we're going quick TDY to Saudi Arabia real quick, and then we're going to stay there for a couple of days, and then we're coming back to do a refueling mission.
Yeah, man.
Or we're going to Qatar, or we're going to hit Japan, and then we're going to hit the Philippines, hit Guam, and then come back. Like,
Yeah,
man,
there was a case I worked with the FBI. A dude committed a double homicide. It was like a drug murder, drug thing. But dude committed a double murder here in Virginia and then fled. He was trying to get back to Mexico, and just like sheer luck, he got pulled over in Las Vegas or just outside of Las Vegas. Um, and we had a bolo out for him, right? So this dude gets hooked up. Well, his vehicle had evidence. So how do we get his vehicle from Las Vegas back to Virginia? And we're talking about evidence, like, you got to maintain custody of the evidence. You can't send an agent out there to drive it back, and then it's like, well, who do we get? We're going to have to tow it back, and somebody's going to constantly have to be with the tow truck and just all the logistics. Well, me being an Air Force guy, I'm like, well, shit, we're very close to the West Virginia National Guard, and they receive money from the federal government for counter drug operations. They do a lot of work with the DEA and stuff like that. So since this is a drug case, I called the National Guard unit and was like, hey, they had C-17s. I'm like, you guys want to fly to Vegas and we load up this car on the back of
they
the
probably said
C-17?
yes at
And
Las Vegas. They're like,
yeah,
yes,
they were
already.
like, absolutely. And I was like, we can do a quick down and back one day. And they were like, no, we're going to have to like fly to Vegas. And like, we're going to probably be on the ground for a day and then we'll load the vehicle up. But anyway, we had this all like approved. And the FBI, when I got back to my office, I was like, here's how I'm going to do this. And they're like, you're not doing that. They shut it down. But it was definitely possible. But the point that I'm making is the pilots were like, heck yeah, dude, we'll fly from West Virginia to Vegas and pick up this car. Like, we need to get training hours anyway. Um, it's a pretty cool world.
So how was it once you actually got to your unit or duty station, or is it more of a, do you have a home base, and how much time do you spend there, and what are you looking like for a way towards home time?
Yeah. So like anything in the military, it depends, right? So you do have a home base. You become a new agent. You get assigned to a detachment. So every Air Force base has an OSI detachment there. So my first base as an OSI agent was J Bear, Alaska. So I was working the base level detachment. And then you can branch out the specialties. Like I said, if you're the guy who sweeps for bugs, or if you're the OSI agent that can sneak into someone's house and put a pin camera in the corner of their living room, you've got a specialty detachment that's somewhere else. But for me, it was I show up to the detachment, and it's like, again, it's like a little mini FBI office, and you're responsible for us. We were responsible for half the state of Alaska. So not only are you investigating the crimes that occur on base, but um, that base has tenant units all over the state, radar sites. If something happens out there, you're investigating, and then if the Russian GRU or SVR, if they fly into Alaska and they're conducting surveillance on stuff, you might be going out there and messing with those guys. Um, so there are a lot of opportunities to travel. You get to go to a lot of cool schools. So traveling for me, it was traveling back to the States for different trainings and stuff like that.
Like technical surveillance or stuff like that?
Yeah, you can go to surveillance schools. You can go to counter threat schools. driving schools, shooting schools, and then some of our own upgrade training. You know, you become an OSI agent a year later, you officially go to the Air Force Counterintelligence School. And then you go to an operational activities course, which is like for austere environments, because you might get a no notice trip. Hey, we need you to go to Africa for 10 days and do this thing. So you get a basic training course that's kind of like a pre-deployment course. Of course, if you're going, like for me going to Afghanistan, I had to go through a month-long pre-deployment train up specific to Afghanistan. But little courses like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had to feel one way when you show up and you found out what security forces was. How are you feeling
Mhm.
about your career now when you get settled into your new job? How are you feeling about where your career is going now at this point?
Yeah, I think again the prestige of graduating from the FLETC and um, of making it an OSI. I think pretty much everyone shows up at their first attachment on a very high note. You know, you're looking at it like I'm in the big leagues now, and I can't wait to see what kind of cases I'm going to get assigned and what I'm going to be working and all this stuff. You know, for me, um, me and the family flew into Alaska. We left Alabama, flew into Alaska. It's like a blizzard. It's middle of the night. We make it to temporary lodging and get checked in. And like 2 hours later, my phone rings and it's the OSI detachment. They're like, hey, we understand you're on the ground. You got your family all settled in? Yeah, yeah. Um, well, we got your first case. We just found a dead body on the side of this mountain. Can you come in? And it's like, dude, I'm still getting settled. I just got here 2 hours ago. Like, is that how this works? And they're like, oh, okay. Come see us first thing tomorrow. And it was like, boom, I hit the ground running. Like I got there the very next day. I'm picking up a case file and they're like, start reading up on this. Sure, we'll give you some time to go find a house and do all that stuff. And it was very flexible, but also it was like, hey man, work starts because that job was busy. Every agent carried at least 7 or 8 cases at a time. So they were eager to get you to work, and for me, it was like I was eager to get to work because I had just gone through the best law enforcement training in the world.
What season did you get there?
It was December. Yeah, yeah. So it was still like 89 degrees leaving Montgomery, Alabama, and then I land, and it's like it was in the 30s because it was actively snowing. But then like the next day we woke up and it was -13, and there's like feet of snow.
Welcome to the party, pal. So you show
Yeah,
up, it's you go warm to cold, new job, you're all excited, and nothing puts a damper on excitement than like extreme cold. Just okay, time to work, buddy. Go out. We got this here for you. That's got to be something else. So I mean, but still, you get there and
and
it's
you're not
got to
even prepared yet. Again, I'm coming from Alabama. Like, I thought I had cold weather gear. I did not, man. Like, that's all stuff you got to get.
no. That's it's different. It's different up there. I went through there in January once, and the sun never came. Like it did. It didn't come up, and
Yeah,
they're doing PT down the road, and they've got the crampons on their feet, on their tennis
yep,
shoes, so that they can run down the ice roads. And I went, I don't know about this place. So I'm gonna get me out of here real quick.
yeah.
So, and you're living that. So now we come into winter, and you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to get to work, and it's fucking freezing.
Fucking cold, man. Again, like feet of snow. Never seen anything like it. But dude, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Alaska was incredible.
So, what's your overlap like? Because you said there's a threshold for when you guys get called. What do you? Because I mean, this is in the States, so you've got the feds also. You're
Yeah.
on par with feds, but there's other agencies there that overlap in the same territory. Where did you see that overlap in where you guys crossed each other? And then sometimes there is no federal agency coverage, like when it kind of comes towards the Native American reservations and things like that. Like, Where did you see where there was possibly too much coverage in what you were doing, and then none at all?
That's a really good question. So I guess starting simplest, the Air Force has regulations and basically a matrix, and that spells out what crimes security forces and their investigators, because just like in the Army, you have MPs and then you have this school called MPI, military police investigators. So security forces has their own plainclothes detective airmen, right? So there's this matrix that breaks down what crimes will be investigated by security forces and then what crimes will be investigated by OSI. And like I said, it's typically that felony level threshold. Um, Sexual assaults, rapes, drugs, firearm stuff, anything that you would typically think of as like, oh, this is FBI is going to be investigating this, not the local police. And then from there, when it comes to external law enforcement agencies, depends on who the criminal is and where it's happening or what it's affecting, right? So the simplest term is a person subject to the UCMJ, so a military member, commits a crime on military property, that's ours. So if it's an airman committing crime on the Air Force base, strictly OSI. Now, airman subject to the UCMJ commits a crime off base. Well, the locals, depending on what the crime is, the locals could take it and they could prosecute him in state court. Um, the feds could come in and take it and prosecute him under federal courts, or we could take it and prosecute him under the UCMJ. So that becomes another big part of OSI's job is the liaison, right? You need to have good relationships with your local police departments, sheriff's departments around the base, and then all the federal agencies. And that way, when an airman commits a crime, we're notified of it, and then we can, do what we need to do. And a lot of times it was if the state was like, hey, this guy beat up an old lady at a bar. Um, we want to prosecute this one, because of whatever reason. Then we'll say, okay, well, how can we assist? What information do you need from the military? Do you need military records, whatever? We're going to help them investigate that crime. Same with the feds. At the federal level, though, there's laws and there's memorandums of understanding that exist. So when it comes to terrorism, FBI is the lead investigative agency in the country for terrorism. Same with espionage. So if you have a terrorist who attacks an Air Force base, FBI has to be the lead investigative agency, but because it's on an Air Force base, and in some cases that terrorist could be an airman, who swore allegiance to ISIS and then shot up the place. We're going to be a partner in that investigation, and we're going to work that alongside them. Drugs, the DEA is the lead investigative agency for drugs. And if it's a major drug trafficking ring, or let's say it's cartel activity that makes its way on an Air Force base, um, we're going to be working that case alongside the DEA, and they're going to be relying on us for support. And it's those partnerships that are important, and those things exist because, if the DEA, not only are they the lead investigative agency, but they're also that deconfliction arm. Because if I start investigating Airman Snuffy because he's buying drugs, and I find out who his supplier is, and I start doing surveillance on the supplier, and um, let's say I go knock on the door, or let's say we send an undercover FBI agent in, and now he's doing exchanges. Meanwhile, the DEA has airplanes over that guy's house and fucking satellite footage, and they've got their own undercover. It can mess a lot of things up. We could interfere with each other's cases, or there's this video they show at FLETC. It's pretty famous. I forget what TV show or movie it's from, but this dude, like, he looks Arab and he like walks into a post office, and then like the post office worker, he like pulls out his gun. He's like, freeze, U.S. Postal Inspector. And then that guy's like, I'm FBI. And then this other guy comes in, he's like, DEA. And then this last guy comes in, he's like, Secret Service. And like all the guys in the room are different undercovers. It's really funny. That type of stuff could happen if it's not for the deconfliction and the partnerships with the feds. But in shortest answer, again, our slice of the pie is the Department of the Air Force. So crimes, whether that's an adversary nation or a criminal organization like cartels or whatever, targeting an Air Force or Space Force base or airmen, or if crimes happen on an Air Force or Space Force base, OSI takes lead.
I assume that I guess You give examples as if say this happened, say this happened. I assume some of those things are in the realm of possibility of things that do happen. If you're given examples like that
But yeah, absolutely,
of
absolutely.
wild shit that the normal population wouldn't think is, you're like, that can't happen. Oh yeah, it can.
Yeah, you would be surprised, and people look at the military and they think like, is there really that much crime in the military? But military bases are just a microcosm of the surrounding area, right? And you can go and look. Um, it was covered on the show Gangland. Like National Geographic had a very popular TV show for years called Gangland, and they did an episode on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they had um, videos of inside the enlisted club, and it's all of these soldiers throwing up gang signs inside the enlisted club and gang activity on base because I think it was the Nine Trey Bloods were very active in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and they were recruiting military members. Um, drug trafficking. We had some major drug trafficking cases when I was in New Mexico, um, just because it was along a major drug corridor, and they would recruit airmen. Um, yeah, all these things happen, and then you can screen out a lot of times. Like career criminals start very young, and recruiters can do a good job of looking at juvenile records, criminal records, and ruling out violent crime or career crime, but you can't really screen for deviancy. And so in the military, we do see a lot of sexual related crimes. And, unfortunately, you see child pornography, and that's a violation that's worked by just about every law enforcement agency at every level. We all have to share in that burden. So the FBI, we have our violent crimes against children squads, but then at the state level, you'll have the internet crimes against children task forces, and then so we get integrated with those. And sometimes you arrest an airman, and you start having that conversation. It's like, all right, this is an Air Force case, and we can prosecute this guy under the UCMJ, but we may have a more successful prosecution, and be able to keep this guy off the streets longer if we run it through federal court. So let's bring in, a civilian federal agency like the FBI, um, or we use some of our civilian Air Force special agents to prosecute this under the United States Code and through, the U.S. Attorney's Office. And instead of that guy, getting whatever his UCMJ punishment is and going to a military prison, no, he's prosecuted in federal court and goes to a federal prison. Um, yeah.
Yeah, because there's different levels of prosecution. Like if the feds are going after you, you are fucked, right? And if you guys want to bring the hammer down on somebody, you give them to the feds and they are going to prison for the rest of it. Because the feds don't prosecute unless they're going to win, right?
Pretty much, yeah. My experience of working with U.S. attorneys is, um, we build really strong cases, um, but there's also things like, there's federal laws that in some states don't apply. Like 9, 18 USC 922G, felon in possession of a firearm.
For all my listeners, obviously, we talk about that so much, that code here on the show.
Yeah, so you've got federal minimums when it comes to being in possession with a firearm, and then you've got career criminal enhancements. So if this is your third strike, you might have a minimum. I can't quote it right now, but it may be 15 years, like automatically 15 years. When it comes to cases like child pornography, I think I can't quote it directly again because I don't have the law in front of me, but it might be like minimum 2.5 years, 2.5 years per image that you possess. But then you have some states that are very, like here in the state of Virginia, I would rather, even as an FBI agent working crimes against children work when I was, if I could partner with a state agency, if I was able to, and they could prosecute that case, I'd rather go that route because the state of Virginia has harsher penalties for crimes against children and internet crimes against children. Um, so it's a balancing act, and it's determining, where you think you can win this case and get the most bang for the buck. And I don't want to sound like, it's not so much a game. Like we're talking about people's freedoms and we're talking about justice. Um,
But there's different
but they're
levels of, it's all based on laws, municipalities, locals. All the
right.
states are completely different. All the federal jurisdictions are completely different as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and then
So
you
that,
guys kind of have a huddle up and go, hey, we got we got to get rid of this person. And what can we
Well, how
do to
is
best protect the people we protect?
yeah, how is justice best served, and how are we best serving society based on the tools that we have at our disposal? So sometimes that is, hey, we're prosecuting under UCMJ. That's the best justice and the best benefit for society to go that route. Sometimes it's, hey, it's federal court. Um,
That can be
yeah,
abused as well, though, too, don't you think?
yeah, it can be, and I think again, I'll put the caveat here that as a reservist, these are my thoughts. I'm not representing the Air Force here. And to that extent, even though I'm no longer an FBI agent, I'm speaking, from my experience. But I think
And
an educated
hypotheticals.
person, yeah, educated person can watch the news and see the scandals. And yes, sometimes the news cycles will throw some stuff out that's absolutely bogus, but part of me leaving the FBI at the time that I did was one after between security forces, OSI, and the FBI, I was 18 years total in law enforcement. I just had enough. But there's also some things to me that were morally questionable and things that I did not want to be a part of. And I think it is very easy for people to get caught up in their job and make it a game. Whether it's prosecutors or investigators saying, I've got to win. I've got to find some way to put this person in jail because that's a win, and I'll do it at all costs. Versus asking the questions: does this person even belong in jail? Do I have an opportunity as an investigator to intervene? Someone's on my radar. I have an investigation open. Maybe they haven't committed a crime yet, but it's looking like it's going that way. So I've got two options. Do I intervene in this person's life and prevent them from committing a crime and maybe change their life for the better? Or do I sit back and wait for them to commit that crime just so I can say, hey, gotcha. I knew you were going to screw up. Now you're going to prison. Um, and I think that's a very, very real situation that can happen for some people. I will say that um, I've never met a dirty cop that I know of because I'm the type of person where that shit doesn't slide. If you're a dirty cop, then you're a criminal and I'm coming after you. But obviously dirty cops exist, right? There's evidence. There's former cops sitting in prison right now. Um, I think the vast majority of law enforcement officers, federal agents, whatever, are doing it for the right reasons and they believe in the oath that they took. Um, but then you also have to battle internal politics and agencies and human egos that sometimes prevent you from doing your job, or maybe, um, interpreting the law a little bit differently than you would. And you have to be bold enough to ask questions and stand your ground on things that you think are immoral. Um, and there were times that I asked questions. There were times that uh, the FBI had asked me to do things that I had questions about, and thankfully I was able to call our in-house legal counsel and ask questions all the way up to DOJ and say, hey, are we doing the right thing here? And in one of those situations, they came back and say, hey, no, you're right. We should not be doing this, and we're going to put a stop to it. So you know,
Everything. Okay. The gray area, and knowing when to properly execute or use the gray area. One of my guests said that is, the problems come when you always operating in the gray area, and
mm-hmm.
then because then there's no room for error. People are like, this guy's always on the edge, or he's always fucked up, and having to use that gray area, and I'm sure that sucks some people. Oh, it does, down the wrong path of always pushing that envelope.
Yeah, and it
So
all depends on who you're talking to and who's interpreting the law too, because you've got some lawyers. We'll go all the way up to Supreme Court. You've got some Supreme Court justices that are very letter of the law. What does the words on paper say? And then you have others that are spirit of the law. What are we trying to um, accomplish here? Why was this law written, and what's the goal? Because obviously things change. Our society has changed a lot since a lot of laws are written. There's still a law on the books, as far as I know, in Alabama, that if a woman is driving a car, then there has to be a man walking in front of it to spot her. I think there's another law in the books in Missouri that if you want to beat your wife, it has to be on the courthouse steps, and the stick can be no longer than whatever. And it's like those laws are on the books. But if you tried that shit today, if you took your wife to the courthouse steps and beat her, you're probably getting prosecuted because things change. Um, but then even more than that, there's a law on the books right now when it comes to crimes against children and the possession of child pornography, and that is that this material, we now refer to it as CSAM, child sexual abuse material. It cannot be transferred across state lines. You read further into the law, and anytime you use the internet, you're basically using that interstate commerce, right? You're transmitting something across state lines by using the internet. So there's an agency out there. It's a nonprofit organization that has law enforcement embedded into it called NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And they send out cyber tips. So they may, you may uncover, it's just a wild scenario, right? Let's say you uncover child pornography because you let someone use your computer and they left behind a file. And you're like, hey, well, Joe Blow used my computer. He left this file. I'm submitting this to NCMEC as an anonymous report. Hey, Joe Blow is in possession of child pornography. Well, you submitted that over the internet. NCMEC is then going to gather those files and they're going to say, well, Joe Blow lives in, Lynchburg, Virginia. So we're now going to send a cyber tip to the agents in Lynchburg, Virginia. Here's the evidence. Here's what you guys need to look at. Go and arrest Joe Blow. So then I go and I arrest him. I seize his hard drive, all this stuff. I then take that evidence and I upload it to an FBI computer system, but it goes into a cloud server so that it can be analyzed by a digital tool who's going to try to, because some of the things we do is we look for known hash values, right? And it might be a child who's been exploited for 20 years because one video's out there and it just keeps getting passed around. Well, now this software is going to say, hey, this is this case. We have an identified victim. All of that use of the internet, technically, by the letter of the law, breaks the law. Me as a law enforcement officer could get prosecuted for transmitting that evidence. But is that the spirit of the law? Is the law written so that I can't do my job and use effective cloud computing tools to, better investigate? No, that's not the spirit of the law. And there shouldn't be a prosecutor in their right mind who would come after me for doing my job as long as I'm doing everything by the book and within the spirit of the law. But it raises questions, right? There's law enforcement agencies now that are scared to use cloud computing because they're like, well, if we do this, our state prosecutors are saying that we're now liable and we're essentially criminals. Stuff like that is ridiculous. And that's the conversations that happen. As asinine as it seems, that's how murky our legal system can be at times. And those are considerations. So now what's the answer? I'm actively involved with one of the congressmen here in my state to actually get a bill passed or an executive order signed that says, hey, here's all the benefits of using cloud computing, and here's all the modern technology that can reduce backlogs and help investigators identify children and put bad guys in jail. They should be allowed to use this, and the law needs to be changed so that they can do that without fear that some rogue prosecutor is going to be like, oh, I'm going after these cops because they're doing their job, but they technically sent, this material over the internet, which violates a federal law.
Yeah, I take things pretty literally. So, but I can see that. I really see it from, and this is like let's get into Terminator here. AI would take that as jaywalking is the same as murder. You broke the law, right? So if it goes by you broke the law, you need to be, whatever punishment needs to be taken out for that. And otherwise you need to change the law. And that's, down the science fiction rabbit hole where we start relying on computers too much. And then it makes that decision. Well, then we put restrictions on people for doing these things. I could see that, absolutely getting out of control if that is the law. But I also see the other side of what you're saying is, yes, that's ridiculous. This is my job to do that. But you can't, you fix one thing and then it creates problems that you can't conceptualize down the road when things do change. As you said, times change. And now it creates new problems for later people to deal with. And that's what's going to happen. The unintended consequences of the problems we're solving now will create problems later, or plastics, everything has plastic in it, right? Everything we do in our lives, and it's solved all these problems in the world. But now it's microplastics are killing us now too.
Now it's in the oceans and it's in our water, it's in our food.
In our food and our animals and everything that we eat. So we're going to create these laws or rules or regulations to solve a problem now, and they're going to create problems later, but that's for later people to worry about, or it's now us. So Yeah, I never you don't think about stuff like that until you see the other side of it. But I mean, I'm learning some things here. I didn't get the, we can pick the jurisdiction or the agency that prosecutes that. I never heard that before, so I'm learning some things here too. But there's so much that goes into this shit, you know. But now going back to your, because that's when you were doing the feds, when you did get pulled away from OSI by the federal fed job. So I'm going to go try this now and actually make some money because um, no matter how hard you work in the military, you're going to get the same as the same rank of person that doesn't do any work at the same base pay. You might get jump pay or you might get some hazard duty pay, but we're talking just a few $100s difference. Um,
Yeah, and that's one of the things about OSI, and there's definitely something. There's times that I wish I would have stayed in, um, but there's also times where I have no regrets because I look at my life and where I'm at today, and I believe my creator has a purpose for me, and when you see things play out, it's like there was a path. But anyway, like I said, OSI, we have active duty special agents and we have civilian special agents. So this one particular unit that I was at, at the time there were just two of us. We were starting a new pipeline and we were building a new capability, and we're slowly bringing agents in. But it was me as an E6 and my partner, a civilian GS 13.
13.
So yeah, and so if you look at the GS pay scales for federal law enforcement officers, if you're an 1811, which means you carry a badge and a gun, you get on top of your base salary, you get what's called law enforcement availability pay or something to that effect, right? So you get an additional 25% of your salary on top for carrying a gun. So right now, a GS 13 step one makes somewhere around $130,000 a year. Whereas an E6 who's doing your duties are no different. You're both field agents. A GS 13 in OSI is not a supervisor. They're just a special agent. So you're doing the same job potentially as an E4. You can come in as early as a E3, E4 to OSI, and because it's one job. OSI, you can't, on the enlisted side, you can't just come straight out of basic training to be an OSI agent. You have to have some other MOS first. But anyway, so yeah, you could be an E4 senior airman doing your job, making, I don't know, 40,000 a year if you're lucky, and your partner who does the same thing as you every day is making 130.
And he's a government employee. Like, I mean, it's really hard. You can go, like, if you're not doing your job, there's UCMJ and all this other stuff. You know, he could just phone it in too and get away with it a lot more. You have a chain of command.
Yeah,
So that's, I get now. Yeah. Why they can't keep people. Cause that's gotta be disheartening in
yeah.
itself.
But the ones who stay are typically in it for the right reasons, right? They want to serve, they want to wear the uniform, they want to protect the Air Force, and they want to protect airmen. Um, so I've met some really incredible leaders in OSI that stick around for the right reasons. They're passionate about what they do and they're good at it. The other aspect of OSI, again, you're working within the military, and maybe you haven't, arrested some top 10 fugitive or someone on the international terror list, or you haven't broken up a drug cartel, and you're like, oh man, like I don't feel like I'm a real federal agent, um, because I'm not doing all this cool stuff. Like I'm just investigating airmen who, you know, sold NVGs to someone in China, which is a serious crime. But to you, you're thinking like, oh, that's small potatoes. Like this is nothing. But then you get into the outside, you start doing your job. For me as an FBI agent, yeah, I worked some pretty big. Like one of my cases, I think is a pretty big deal that I worked. Um, but day in, day out, it was the same stuff, and we would get stupid complaints all the time. Again, we're the FBI, we're the most popular law enforcement organization in the world. So everyone thought that they would just call us. It's like my neighbor's stealing my Wi-Fi, and like the local sheriff won't do anything about it. So I'm going to call the FBI about it. Or you'd get phone calls, and it's like, I got this one lady one time. She thought Donald Trump was targeting her because she kept seeing commercials on her TV, and she was convinced that the Republican Party had hacked into her home Wi-Fi and were sending these harassing Donald Trump ads to her TV. And she wanted to tell the FBI about it. Um, And sometimes if the complaints come across a certain way, you don't have a choice, man. I had a dude who had to go out into the streets and look for a werewolf. Um, I had to investigate a guy one time because he was accused of being a terrorist and he was from a foreign country. And it's like the way this comes across, Congress says that, if it's a terrorism accusation, the FBI must investigate. Um, you get the initial complaint, and you start looking at it, and you're like, this is dumb, but I have to work it. It happens. So it's not the grass isn't always greener, and I'm sure you've got enough life experience to realize that it's greener where you water it, right? But it's not always greener on the outside. And
It's greener over
like,
there because you're not fucking it up.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
not over there
and
fucking it up.
money isn't everything either, dude. I'm a firm believer that money is the root of all evil. Money does not lead to happiness. I know plenty of wealthy people that are miserable, and I know people who are living full, awesome lives, and you know they're still lower enlisted in the military that are having the adventure of their freaking life, and getting paid in peanuts. But it's all about perspective.
It is. It is. And I'm broke as fuck, and I'm having a blast right now. But we're trying to fix that. So, how or why did you get pulled over to a special missions unit? And we won't get too much into that because, as I said before,
Yeah.
even if you went into what you did in exact detail, not only would you become a pariah, you'd lose a lot of your friends.
Yeah.
People listening wouldn't care, and some of it would they go, "That's not true," and I go, "Okay, whatever, man." Like, there's all kinds of shit going on. But what was the allure over there? Was this something where they went, "Hey, come over here," or is this something you sought out?
Yeah, so I didn't even know this place existed. And would not have known if I had not been contacted. So the short of it is 2015, going back to Afghanistan, our team loses 6 of our members. OSI instantly flies out an operational psychologist. I mean, this was the largest loss of American life in 2015 as far as combat loss goes, but it was also the largest loss of life for OSI as an agency. We had lost agents before in Iraq and stuff like that, but never 6 at a time. So it was a big deal. So they fly out this psychologist, and her job there is to, one, assess people for TBI, like people that were around the blast, if they were affected, and looking for those signs so they could get sent home and go get treatment. Looking for severe PTSD, who was still mission capable and who needed to take that knee and go get some help. So she sat on the ground with us for, I think, like a month, maybe. It could have been less than that. That time period is a little bit of a blur. Um, so while she was there, not only did she assess us, and she kind of like, certified that everyone who was still there could be there and needed to be there, but then she started kind of getting into our operations. So, part of the job that we were doing as a task force is keeping the airfield green. If planes can't take off, then the Air Force can't conduct its mission, right? So the things that shut down the airplane typically are incoming, right? These rocket attacks, these mortar attacks that the Taliban were uh, pretty good at pulling off. So it's our job to look for those threats, hunt those people down, find out who's responsible, from the guy who launches the rocket all the way to the guy in Pakistan who's financing it. We build out those networks and we build those target packages. And we do that by running sources. We recruit members of the Taliban to tell on their friends. So she started getting into the weeds from the psychological standpoint into a lot of the ops that we were running, and helping us out, and giving us some tips, and psychoanalyzing some of the guys, because you're always looking for that insider threat too. Is this guy a double agent? Is he gonna, the next time we meet with him, is he gonna blow us up? Um, so at the she leaves, I finish out that deployment, I go back to Alaska, and any type of overseas tour, Alaska is considered overseas, you have a hard return date. So my 3 years in Alaska was coming up. It's time for me to get orders, and I wound up pulling orders to OSI headquarters in Quantico, and I was going to be reviewing closed cases. Like, it's a death sentence for a guy like me who still wants to get after it, but it's a function that's necessary. But that was my fate. I'm going to review closed cases. Um, so I start reaching out to some people throughout the command and some of the agents that I knew who were up at headquarters, and seeing if maybe there was It's like, all right, if I can't get out of going to Quantico, maybe I can get onto a different squad up there. And instead of reviewing closed cases, maybe I can work cold case or do something more operational. And I guess word had gotten around to her. So eventually I'm sitting at my desk in our skiff and I get a phone call and, hello. She's like, hey, is this Agent McCoy? I'm like, yeah. She's like, hey, this is, so and so. I heard you're coming to headquarters. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, and how do you feel about that? Like, are you excited about that move? Is that what you want to do? And I was like, absolutely not. I'll do anything other than that. She's like, okay, well, I've got an opportunity for you. So the backstory here is, there had always been OSI embedded in this unit, more as like a backside support type role. And it'd been that way for years. And then the right OSI agent got to that unit and started looking at the type of stuff that they did and said, hey, well, have you guys ever thought about bringing in OSI agents? Because you're taking an assaulter or, an operator, PJ, whatever, a guy who's got these core skills, and you're trying to teach him these core skills over here, things like, surveillance and covert communications and just all of this like kind of spooky stuff was an aspect of the job. And he's like, this is what, in the Air Force, we have different levels. I don't know how the Army does it, but you come out of your basic training or whatever, you're a 3 level, then 5, 7, 9. So he's like, this is the skills that our 3 level agents are learning in the Air Force, like some of the stuff that you want to teach them. And, we go to these firearms schools, we go to these driving schools, really high level stuff. So they were like, well, we can give this a shot. So they opened up a pipeline to operationalize OSI agents in this unit. And I got to be a part of the first selection. So I think like 8 of us went down there, and I happened to be the only one to get the thumbs up from that ANS. But it was because of her, because she had gotten brought in on the operational psychology side. Because I don't know what they do for SFAS, but for this unit, there was a physical component, sure, but a lot of it was a mental component, and the different games that they play, and you're sitting there. There was a whole day of just filling out bubble sheets and psyche evals and stuff like that to make sure that you could do this job. So she was there for that reason, and thankfully for her, I had met her in Afghanistan, and she thought of me to come and try out.
How much different was Alaska's? I mean, I guess none of it's really conventional. You're just doing your thing as an OSI agent, kind of being a Fed running around for the Air Force. But how did things change for you? Did it become more direct and defined of what you were actually doing, even though it was still probably ambiguous?
Yeah, I would say my role at this unit was very niche, was very different from anything um, conventional OSI was doing. Again, the OSI is the executive agency for counterintelligence in the Air Force. We are the counterintelligence arm, and that's a component of what I did there. Was you know whenever we were operational and on the ground, my role was to protect our mission and protect the team from that counterintelligence standpoint, and gather information to not only further the mission but to protect the team. And then on the backside, it was when we were planning. It's now they had an in-house counterintelligence guy to review operational planning and make sure that the plan was sound and protectable, I guess you could say. Um, so there were some aspects of it that you would absolutely expect as an OSI agent, and there were other aspects and things that we got brought into that blew my mind. But you could see how we were somehow uniquely suited to do that job.
And so, how was it working with like it's one, the military is professional, and then you get into a more specialized unit, and then it gets a little bit more professional because there's a culling process, and then the higher you go, well, now you're there at the professional organization. How was it working with that and holding yourself to a different standard? Because that's a whole different ball game, a different group of people that you're working with, and you go, do I belong here working with these guys?
Absolutely right. Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier, but that imposter syndrome was very real for me. It's I'm constantly in the back of my mind, I'm waiting for them to be like, oh, actually we screwed up, and like you weren't the guy we wanted to select, but we got the paperwork mixed up and this other guy belongs here, not you. So this has been a whole big misunderstanding. And that never happened. I got a lot of kudos from my teammates while I was there, but I always felt that way. Like, man, these guys, and it wasn't just the operators, right? It wasn't,
No, it's
from
everybody.
my from the squadron commander, from the group commander, you know, all the way down to the lowest ranking person in our unit, from the guy who was a door kicker for the last 8 years of his life, all the way down to our finance guy. Everyone was the best at their job. You know what I mean? And they just conducted themselves so professionally, and it was mind blowing to me because, again, there's a certain level of acceptable incompetence in the military. And you go to units, and there's your high performers, there's your hot shots, and then there's a dude over there that's just the constant duffel bag, and he's got a paperwork trail a mile long so that the military can kick him out. Those guys didn't exist here. Everyone was a top tier professional. And then there was me. I'm just some dude trying to fit in, trying to belong. So it was an incredible experience, and it was a really high functioning place to work. And that's why I say, like, the drive for me for joining the FBI was never about money. Because of where I worked and the things we did, we got a lot of exposure to outside units, and one of those was the FBI's hostage rescue team. Right, so in the tactical world, they're considered, they are the tier one of civilian law enforcement tactical teams. They're up there on par with with CAG from the Army. Um, as far as capabilities go, right? So these guys would come in to brag from time to time, and they would train with various units, and I got to meet some of their members, and they said, "Hey, man, we heard you were thinking about getting out. You're already an OSI agent, so you know that world. Why don't you come and join HRT?" And I never considered that. The agency that I was really targeting if I was going to leave was the U.S. Marshal Service. I think they're an outstanding agency, but this HRT thing popped up, and I'm like, yeah, man, like, in my mind, I'm already wearing that T-shirt, right? Like, in my mind, I'm operating at a very high level. And though I don't consider, I consider myself a direct support guy at most, but still, um, in that special operations vein, HRT seemed like a good gig. So that's why I ultimately applied for the FBI and chose to go over there. And then things changed when I got here. I get to my first assignment. Um, because to go to HRT in the FBI, you have to spend. I came in as a tactical recruit, so that means I had to wait 2 years to be able to go to selection for HRT, whereas most agents have to wait like 3 or 4, maybe more. Um, so I think, hey, I'm going to go to my first FBI field office, maybe DC, maybe wherever. I'm going to stick it out for 2 years, and then we're going to move to Quantico, and I'm going to go be on HRT. Well, we get assigned to Lynchburg, Virginia. This was our seventh move as a family. Um, it's just a wonderful community. But then the other unintended consequences, because being at the unit that I was at, again, it's world class. We have a gym that looks like the Dallas Cowboys gym. You know what I mean? There's like turf in there. There's every machine. There was offices all the way around, like the main gym area, and then you had nutritionists and personal trainers, and then we had a room for rehab and physical therapists, and we had our own med shed on our compound, and you just had all these things. So I walked out of there, and I was in the best shape of my life. I breezed through Quantico, the FBI Academy, just because I was rock solid. I had gone through years of just very tailored personal training. Um, well, I joined the FBI. The academy's done, so I'm not running around every day. And then COVID hits, and the gyms are shut down. Even the gym in our office, we couldn't go into. All that COVID nonsense. And I started to get out of shape. And I think, I consider it like my body was held together very tightly. I had all these military injuries, but I really wasn't affected because everything was nice and tight. And then COVID hits, and I start kind of getting a little sloppy, and everything loosens up. And before I know it, like, from the base of my neck all the way down to my ankles, I'm just in chronic pain, and I'm finding out that I have herniated discs and hip impingements, and my knees are jacked up, and I've got shooting pains, and I'm like, all right, I can still go and assess for HRT, and even if I make it through selection, because I credit myself with having a certain amount of to be able to get through these things. Like my first selection level ruck, I did one time. I did a 26.2 mile ruck, essentially a marathon ruck with 50 pounds. The most I'd ever rucked before that was 5 miles. And I went into that thing thinking, if I make it halfway, this is good. And then I was like the second person to complete um, that ruck. So I have some gur. But even if I make it through and suck it up and get on HRT, am I going to be an effective member of that unit with the issues that I'm having? And then do I still have to drive? When I was still in the military with that high level unit, um, I was averaging about 280 days a year on the road, just gone away from the family. Well, HRT, in the very same vein, they go through cycles, right? They're operational, and then they go through like a rest and refit cycle, and then they go through a training cycle, then they're back operational. So you really, during your rest and refit, you might have 30 days on the ground, or I'm sorry, 3 months on the ground where you're just kind of, you know, at home, going to the range every day, medical appointments, whatever. But for the rest of that time, when you're operational or you're training, you're probably not in Quantico, Virginia. You're probably somewhere else around the world. So it was, do I need to prove anything to myself? No, like I've already been there. I've got that T-shirt. Do I need to spend more time away from the family? Because now I'm getting involved in things like coaching soccer for my kids, um, just being around to help the wife out, all that stuff. So, and then the final component, me and my wife were driving one day because she spent about 6 months. Her and the kids were still in North Carolina finishing out the school year, and I was up here by myself. Well, we finally get settled into Virginia. We buy our house. The first fall kind of rolls around, and we're just driving out of our neighborhood. And my wife just looks at me. She's like, "I love it here. Like, can we just stay here forever?" And it's like, all right, no way can I ask my family to pull chocks and now move to Northern Virginia just so I can chase this dream of HRT. Um, and that might have been like the first nail in the coffin of my FBI career, because it's like, all right, well, that's why I joined this place. And if I'm not going to do that, then what am I doing? And do I really want to do this for the next 20 years of my life? And ultimately, that answer was no.
Yeah, because we'll walk back through the whole thing, right? Security forces, a protection aspect of that. Then you go over to OSI, and that's got to be a stress level that you probably aren't aware is there all the time with what you're doing. And it's got to be
Yeah.
creeping in. And, dealing with all these different things and then seeing some of the things that you're seeing, which the general population has no idea. No idea. You can watch crime documentaries and all this other stuff and get a little thing, but you're not actually there on the side of the road or in the house or in the warehouse or behind the scenes or watching the ISR footage or all any of this other shit, right? You're not
Yeah.
there.
You're exposed to the absolute worst that humanity is capable of. That's your job.
And it's creeping in and creeping in. And then you get pulled into a whole nother world, right? And you got to maintain that. Not only are you seeing this stuff, but then you're you're stressed out with having to try and keep up with everybody else there. We got this
It's
high standards.
it's heavy. When you're at that level, there's no one else to call. There is no more there isn't another unit to go to, whereas like when you're in security forces, yeah, stuff's going too bad, you call OSI. Stuff starts going too bad, and it's, you know, Navy SEALs and Green Berets start showing up, and then there's a level of backup that goes above them. But once you get up to the top of the pyramid, it's like it's heavy, man, because we're it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then prior to that, you've lost 6 friends in Afghanistan, and then you get to the FBI. How are you starting to feel it drag on you mentally? Because you get
Oh,
tired of the
absolutely. Yeah.
routine, but also there's that feeling. I'm just tired, man. I'm just tired. And now I loop back all the way to the beginning. Now we get to the bow where you just silence. You just draw the bow back and the arrow, and it's just
Yeah.
silent. There's nothing else. There just has to have been a lot of noise up to that point.
A lot of noise, man. Again, a lot of stress. Yeah, I spent years and years of my life in that stress level red, especially in a law enforcement role. Because yeah, OSI, we do some heavy stuff while we're deployed, but again, we worked with third group a lot. So those third group guys, they're doing even heavier stuff than us deployed. But when they go home, they're home. They're at the range. They're shooting the Carl G, having fun, whatever, until
Ruining
their
their
next deployment.
lives. Yeah,
Yeah,
ruining their home
yeah.
lives so that they can go have live
Finding
the
their
real life. Yeah.
finding their third wife, but they do have that break. Well, when I come back from Afghanistan, I get my 30 days off, but then it's back to work. And what's the next case I'm working? The next case I worked was an airman who was spying for the Russians. So I'm right back into like, this is heavy. This is a no fail type of thing. Um, you know what I mean? So same with the FBI, right? Every day is high level and you never know what the phone call is going to be. Some days you show up to work and you think your day is going to go like this. And then suddenly there's a bank robbery or someone has kidnapped a kid or there's a shooting, whatever it is. Um, there were a lot of times, especially towards the tail end of my career in the FBI, where I would have to come home and the first thing that I would have to do is shoot my bow. I would have to get that mental reset. I would have to shoot my bow and become a different person. Because if not, if I walked into the house mad at the world because I just saw something terrible happen to a child or saw whatever it was, whatever I was dealing with, now I'm going to come in, I'm going to be a dick to my wife or a dick to my kids and there were times where that happened, I'd come in and I would just be a different person and I'd see the reaction from my family. And it's like inside my head, I'm saying I'm the problem. But then of course I've got my own ego to deal with. So it's like, no, you guys just don't understand type of thing, so I would have to go and shoot my bow to just shut it all off for a minute and take that breath. Um, and again, that might've been the third or fourth nail in the coffin of that FBI career where it's like, I know what the answer is. I know what my outlet is. I know what I need to do. But also I was working so much, I'd get off work at 5. And then sometimes if you're in the heat of a case, especially a big case, I worked one that spanned the whole nation, so I'm here in Virginia. I get off work, but I've got an agent in California that's only been at work for a few hours. And now he's calling me because he's trying to update his side of the case. And I'm on the phone until 10 o'clock at night and I'm just not present. So something had to change. And for me, it was like, I still want to serve my country and I believe in serving my country. And I believe in us having the responsibility as long as we're capable. But at the same time, this thing with Endex, I need to grow this because this is another way that I'm serving. I've got one of my ambassadors. He was never in the military, never in law enforcement. He's real self-conscious about it because he's like, man, like we're doing this work and I'm around all these guys, but I never served. And I had to tell him like, dude, you're serving right now. You giving back to these veterans right now is an act of service. And it's important, because the worst thing that can happen, is someone uses all those bad methods and it leads to a gun in the mouth. And there was that 22 a day thing that was going on for a while and people are doing push-ups. And it's like, all right, me doing push-ups in my living room for Facebook is not saving a veteran's life. People are well aware of the fact that veteran suicide is high. Like if you're on social media for a minute, you become aware of the fact that veteran suicide is high. But what are we actually doing? So, that's where our motto became acta non verba. That's Latin for deeds, not words. It's let's get off our asses and go do something. Let's actually impact their lives versus we just talk about it or we do some push-ups for 22 days because someone tagged us in a video and we don't want to look like a piece of shit for not doing push-ups. No, let's go do something. And I know something that I can do. I can hand somebody a bow and have some conversations and change their life.
I try not to shit too much on the 22 push-ups because for this reason, it has done the advertising, right? It spreads this thing out there and creates it. But it also has come up with this anti-benefit, which is a real benefit, is it gets people to go, well, that doesn't fucking do anything. I'm gonna go do something. So it made
Yeah.
this other campaign of that's not how you do it. I'm gonna go fucking do it myself. What is it called? Negging, or reverse psychology.
Yeah, no, and
Sort
that's
of.
to your point. I'd had the idea for Endex for a while. Me and Ray had talked about it, but when I decided, hey, we're launching this, and I got on Facebook and I posted, I made a new page and was like, Endex Archery exists now, and it was because I was day 6 into doing push-ups, and I was like, what am I actually doing?
Yeah. So
Let's start
and
Index.
that's what I say because I like to tell people like I see other people and I want to do more. And not the competition side. I just feel like I should be doing more. And I go back to that. It's the push-ups wasn't hurting anything, but it did create people going, "Oh, fuck, that's not how you do it. But this is how you do it. You actually go do something." So I try to tell people, get people into that. I don't what however people think about it, but it's not a total waste of time. It did create people wanting to do more than what they were doing, and also do your push-ups. I mean, come on, they're good for you. Fuck, man. What's the future? I mean, you said the goal is to have the ranch in all 50 states and you know, what is it? You got a three no, this is me making this up. You got a 3D hunting league, right? Sponsored by the Army with its own team and Endex Archery is a thing there. Now, what does the future look like that you ideally have for Endex Archery?
Oh, that sounds great, man. Yeah. So the future is we're going to revolutionize the way people look at archery as therapy and alternative methods for therapy for mental health. We're going to build our proving grounds here in Virginia. We're going to have communities and ambassadors in all 50 states. Um, but more importantly, we're going to partner with as many other nonprofits as we can, right? And we're going to build a network. You know, the ideal goal for me is you have a buddy that retires from the army. He's in a rough spot. And you say, hey, man, um, Index Archery, look him up. He meets an ambassador in wherever he's at. Let's say he's in Alabama. He meets an ambassador in Alabama. They send him to the proving grounds for 5 days. He goes home with a bow, a changed life, and he makes a new community. He then partners with my buddy Tony Cowden from the Reason Outdoors or Valor and Honor Outdoors, or you name it. You know what I mean? And he goes on his first hunting trip. And now he becomes an archer who goes to a league on the weekends and he bow hunts and he fills his freezer with his own meat. And then suddenly he's 3 years into his journey and another guy pops up and he says, hey, bro, I got you. And he calls me. And now his buddy comes through the program. And when he gets back to Alabama, that guy's waiting for him. And it's this cycle that just keeps perpetuating. And like I said, we're partnering with all these other nonprofits. You know, if a guy comes through and he says, hey, man, this archery thing, my shoulder's too messed up. I can't shoot a bow, but I like the idea. I say, check out Project Healing Waters and you start fly fishing instead. Um, and it just becomes this community for veterans and first responders. And it's total wellness. And again, you know, and it eliminates that guy from having to go to the VA and saying, hey, I need some more pills. Or that guy from saying, you know, the VA sucks and the pills aren't working, so I'm going to drink myself into oblivion. Um, you know, and I would love to see that 22 a day number eventually. You know, we'd all love to see zero, but let's make an impact on that. Let's make a measurable impact on that 22 a day. That's the future for me.
Fuck yeah, man. All right. I love it. I got 5 questions here for you, and I'll cut you loose.
Yeah, shoot, brother.
What's your response to thank you for your service?
It's an honor. It was an honor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. I stole that one right away. My first day out of the military, I got that one. So that's my favorite. What is the one characteristic that sets operators apart from the conventional forces?
Critical thinking. Yeah.
Is that not
The ability, the ability to think critically under pressure and solve hard problems. That's what makes, to me, that's what makes someone an operator.
not so common in some of the lower levels? What is the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive or redo, and it wouldn't change where you are now?
Hmm. The one moment I could redo. Man, so I think you've probably gotten this one before. I never took enough pictures, and in some cases, like there's a reason for that. There are times I was not allowed to take pictures. But even early on in those first couple years in the military, right? Like just having those memories and really like soaking it in, enjoying, like embracing the moment. I spent a lot of time chasing the next thing through my career, as you can see, as I, constantly change jobs. Um, I wish I could go back to like being a brand new airman. I came in as an E3, so E3 McCoy, and just sit with him for a minute, even if it's on that flight line with that stupid ass 249, um, and just like, hey man, take a minute, take it in, appreciate where you are right now. Yeah,
Because it's going to be over like that.
goes by so fast.
What is the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Mm. When I was looking at, all these different possibilities and retraining, um, and what was next for Airman McCoy, or maybe it was Staff Sergeant McCoy. I had a commander at the time, and he quoted Abraham Lincoln, and he said, "Hey man, whatever you're gonna be, whatever you decide to be a good one." And I think that says a lot without saying very much. You know what I mean?
It's one, man. What were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
I've always dealt with that certain level of insecurity, whether it was in the military, trying to be a member of a team, or now as the president of a nonprofit. It's um, not being able to meet the mark for the people that are relying on me. Right? There's heroes out there that we haven't reached yet that need me to build this program and make this a success, so that I can serve them. Um, there's a team of people around me who need me to, not only be responsible with the gift that we've been given through Index, but build it for their sake too. um when it was in the military, it's the same thing. Sometimes, and it's not always the case, not everything's life and death, right? But some of it is the mission, and those things have impacts, and something menial on your end could have that butterfly effect all the way up to direct national security implications. So it's like, do your part. Don't be the weak link in the chain.
I really appreciate you coming on today. How can everybody find you on the socials if they so choose?
Yeah, at Index Archery across all of our socials, and that's mostly just going to be Index. I mean, Instagram and Facebook. I think we do have a Twitter account that I hardly ever use, and we don't have TikTok. But that's Endex Archery, and then you can find us on our website, indexarchery.org. Again, endexarchery.org.
Yeah, man. I'll have links to your socials and your website in the show description. You got anything for me?
Just that I appreciate you, man. Like, one, I think the long form style and the content really helps guys like me or anyone who comes on your show share their story, get their point across. But just the opportunity, you provide a platform, you provide a space for us to raise awareness for what we're doing, and it's huge. It matters. Um, really appreciate it.
It's an honor. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on, as always. Bye, everybody.